Good morning, guys. Am I audible to all of you?
Good morning, sir.
Yes, good morning, sir.
Very good morning. My screen is also visible to all of you, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So today it's going to be a 2 to 3 hour session, right? And in between we will take 5 minutes of break also. And please keep patience and watch the session and carefully. And anybody, anytime, anyone having any issue, any question, right? Anything related to any statement which they do not understand, right? While we are doing the examples, they can ask me directly. At the same time, don't wait till the session completed, right? Or don't wait my explanation is completed. Any question having anybody, they can ask me directly, right? Because it is that important. And most of the real-time applications nowadays, they are using this concept called AutoMap, right? So let us start the discussion. And before starting and before understanding what is AutoMapper, right? Let us first understand why do we need AutoMap. If I will ask this question to you guys, okay, anybody having any idea what is AutoMapper or why we need to use AutoMapper?
So AutoMapper is used to, let's say, I was designing a database, so I have a class. But at the time of retrieval, I need a different structure of a class. So at the time, I need to create a one more view model. So based on the view model, I want to create an object. From there, I want to retrieve the data. So instead of that, I can use AutoMapper to map the data to from one object to another object. So at the situation, I can use an AutoMapper.
But in that case, if your database contains, let's assume one table contain 10 records or 10 different columns, and in the view, right, what you want to share to the presentation layer or to the anybody from outsider, you want to share 8 columns, right? Then in that case, you can create a storage procedure and you can retrieve those 8 records only, 8 columns only. Then why you need to use AutoMap? You understand my question, my point?
Yeah, I can understand.
So if that is your requirement, then you should not use AutoMap. In that case, what you can do, you can create a storage procedure or you can write the query, right? If you are using context class, then in the context class, you can project only those what I can say, 8 columns to the output, and you can return that. Then why you need to use AutoMapper in that case? Because if you are using AutoMapper, then additional thing is going to be happen. Additional thing in the sense what? Additional thing means mapping one object with another object. That is the additional thing, which is also going to take some time. Yeah, Chandra, David, anybody having any more answer or see whether it is the right approach or wrong approach, that is also appreciated because you need to give some scenario, you need to tell something, right, which should be then we'll discuss whether that approach is good enough to use AutoMapper or not, whether any better approach is there. That is also fine. I don't care whether the answer is good or bad, but I want you guys should share something. You guys should have something on your mind. You need to express your thought. That is what my intention. Any other solution, any other answer from anyone else? David?
Oh, no, sir.
Okay. Okay, uh see basically what happened, let me first explain you the thing. Right. So as you know, we are having different layers. One is presentation layer, right? The presentation layer where you will present the data. That might be your web application, right? That might be your Android application, right? That might be your iOS application or some desktop application, etc. So you need to provide the data to the presentation layer. Who is going to be provide the data? The business layer. Business layer will get the data from where? From the data access layer. Or business layer, or sometimes you will also get the data from where? You will get the data from some different API, right? So what it basically it means, now from your business logic, you are getting the data from some third-party API, or you are getting the data from a different project, right? So you can consider this is one project, right? This is project one, right? That might be developed using MVC application, Angular application, React application, Android, IDE, whatever it may be, right? So you are this is your API, right? You are creating your API. This API will give the data to whom? This API will provide the data to the presentation layer. But from where this API getting the data? This API will interact with another layer called the data access layer, right? This is a different project. This is, you can say, project 2, project 2, and that is, you can say, project 3, project 3, you can say, this is the project 3, which is nothing but your data layer. So this is a project 3 here, data layer. This data layer will interact with the database. This data layer will provide the data to the project 2, which is nothing but your API. Your API will provide the data to the presentation layer, which might be your web application, Android, iOS, desktop, in any kind of application. So this data layer, what this data layer does, he return you 10 columns, right? He return you 10 columns to which layer? To the API layer or to the project 2. Those 10 columns is required by this project 2 layer, because he needs to do some processing, right? In this layer only you are going to write the business logic. So here you need to process the data. You need all the 10 records, all the 10 columns. Then you cannot skip those things. So what you need to do? You need all the 10 columns. So this layer return you one, what I can say, this project 3 return you 10 columns. This project 3 return 10 columns to project 2 layer. And here, while you are getting the data, you cannot simply skip one column or two column or three columns. Why? Because you need to also say, as you are storing the data in the database, sometimes this API layer also having some database, right? Where they also need to store the data. Again, this API layer, or you can say here you have written the business logic, right? Or any kind of logic, right? Here you also need to process the data. For processing the data, you need all the 10 record, all the 10 columns. That means whatever columns provided by data access layer, you need all those columns here also. Once you process the things, right? Once you process the data, now from this layer, you don't want to return all those 10 columns. You want to return how many columns? 5 columns to the UI layer for the presentation, right? Then what you need to do, right? You are having one object. So in this projection layer, you are having one object with 10 columns, with 10 property, you can say, because we are working with the .NET. You want to return another object, right? You want to return another object to whom? To your project one or UI layer, which will contain 5 property. Sometimes you might be sometimes you want to return 10 property, sometimes you want to return 5 property, sometimes you need to return 7 property, like this. Now, what you need to do? You cannot simply return this object, because if you return this object, it include all the properties. It includes some sensitive information which you do not want to give to this UI layer. Then what you need to do? You need to create another object, and in that another object, you need to store the required properties from this object, right? If this object having 10 property, you want to include 5 property, then this another object is going to contain 5 properties. If you want to contain 7 properties, then you need to create another object with 7 property and then copy the data from this object to this object. You want all the 10 property, no issue. You can also copy the data one by one, right, from this object to this object. This is nothing but one hectic process, right? Why hectic process? See, today my class contain 5 property. I can easily create an object and I can easily copy the property value one by one. Tomorrow, my class property increased 5 to 50. Then again, I need to do the copy paste thing again and which on mute, right? Then again, we need to do the same copy paste thing again and again, which is not only time consuming but also error prone. So to overcome this problem, we need to use AutoMapper. So let us first see one example, right? Where I will show you the traditional approach of mapping the object, mapping one object to another object. Then we will discuss the problem and then we will see how we can use AutoMapper to overcome those problem and what are the things we can use with the AutoMapper. Many things you can do using AutoMapper. AutoMapper nested mapping is there. AutoMapper mapping from complex type to primitive type, from primitive type to complex type. How you can ignore a property, right? Then many other things. How you can store some fixed value. How you can store some dynamic value. How you can store some value based on some condition, right? How you can substitute the null value. Many things you can do using AutoMapper, and everything we are going to discuss one by one. So let us start with the discussion of what is the traditional approach of mapping one object with another object. Then we will see the problem and then we will see how we can identify and how we can overcome those problems using AutoMapper, right? So let me create a class file with the name employee.cs. I have already created a class file with the name employee.cs. I just copy paste the code. So this is my employee object. Now, what is my requirement? This employee object data I get from one layer. Now, I want to transfer, right? I don't want to transfer those employee data, right? I want to create a different object for some reason, and I want to transfer that different object to the UI layer. Then what is with your traditional approach? So what you will do with the traditional approach? First of all, you should have this employee object. Then you need to create employee DTO object, and then you need to copy the employee object values one by one with the employee DTO object. Let me show you the steps, right? So this is the approach that you generally follow, right? First of all, you need to create an employee object. Here I'm hard coding the employee object, but in real time, right? This will not be the case. You will get this employee object from a different application, right? From that application might be a WCF application, that might be an API application, right? That might be a class library project, right? But so basically, that's basically is a different project. From that project, from that layer, you are getting the employee object, right? And now you don't want that employee object to be returned to the UI layer. So what you need to do, you need to create a different object and then you need to copy the data, right, from this object to that object, right? Then what is the process? I'm just creating the employee DTO object and I'm copying the name. What is the employee object name to this name property, salary to this salary property, address to this address property, department to this department property. See, in this case, I'm keeping the property's name as it is. It is not mandatory that the property name should be same. You can give any name. There is no issue, right? So now with these changes, what you can do, if you run the application, then you will see that whatever data this employee object, the same data it is also having with the employee DTO object. And then I'm printing the values to check whether the object having the same value or not. So this is the traditional approach of copy pasting, or you can say mapping one object with another object. So this is the traditional approach. What is the problem? The problem is that suppose tomorrow your class, right? Tomorrow few more properties are added with your class, like this. right? So few more properties are added with your class. Then what you need to do? Again, what you need to do? Again, you need to do the same thing, right? Same thing in the sense, again, you will come to here and you need to do the changes here. That means you are touching the existing code, you are touching this code again and again, right? And second thing, assume that these changes, whatever you are doing, this mapping, it is not only used at one place, but also it is going to be used at many different places. Here you are accessing the employee data and transferring this to employee data to employee DTO. And same thing you are doing at many places in your application. Then what will happen? Then it is nothing but it is going to be a time consuming process. Time consuming process means again and again you need to write the same logic to map the employee object data with the employee DTO object, and again you need to write the same logic at many different places. This is also error prone process. Why error prone? If you are writing this logic at 5 places, if you forgot to do the same thing, right? If you forgot to do this manual copy paste at one place, then it is nothing but some error for your application, right? So this is we need to avoid. Is there any better solution to this? So do you in any approach is there where this mapping is going to be done automatically for us, where in any number of places this mapping should be done automatically. We just need to tell them that this is my employee object, this is my source object, this is my target object, and please do the mapping automatically. So if the source of automatically in the sense, please take the source object name value and store it inside the name value of the destination object. This mapping should be done automatically, not manually. The way we are writing, it should be avoided. Because if I don't know if currently your class contain only 5 or 10 properties, if 50 properties are there, then it is nothing but your it is nothing but how big your code size will be. Again, how much time you will give to write this manual activity. Again, if the same activity is going to be done at many different places in your application, then also it is also going to be a very hectic process. So we should avoid these things, right? And how we can avoid this thing? By using the concept called AutoMapper. Clear, guys? Any question?
Clear.
Okay. Now we will discuss what is AutoMapper. See, AutoMapper actually a mapper between two objects. What is a mapper? Mapper means it is going to be to some object to object mapping. So AutoMapper is an object mapper. It means it will map the object properties. It will map the properties of one object with the properties of another object. It will take one object properties as input and another object with as the output. It will map the properties of one object with the properties of another object, right? AutoMapper also provides some interesting facts like which will also going to overcome the data work what we are going to do, right? Like what I can say. See, if you are having one class contain some complex type and another class contains some primitive type. Now you want to map the complex type properties value to the primitive type. That is also possible. If you want to ignore some properties while doing the mapping, that is also possible. You want to map based on some condition. That is, if the quantity value is greater than 100, then only map that quantity property from the source object to the destination object. Otherwise, don't map. That is also possible. If the name starts with the letter ABC, then only map that name property. Else, some other map or some other property to the name property. That is also possible. Many things we can do using this AutoMapper, and one by one we are going to discuss everything and all those things, right, as we progress, right? So before that, what we need to do, we need to understand what is AutoMapper, right? So what is AutoMapper means? AutoMapper is a mapper between two objects. It will map the properties of one object with the properties of another object. It will map the properties from which object is nothing but your source object. It will map the properties to the it will map the properties to another object. That another object is nothing but your destination object. That means while you are going with the AutoMapper, there are two types. One is called as the source object, and another one is called as the destination object. From the source object, it will map the properties from the source object to the properties of the destination object. Then while we're doing this mapping, we also need to tell the AutoMapper, hey, Mr. AutoMapper, this is my source object, this is my destination object, and now it is your responsibility to map the properties from the source object to the destination object. And then the AutoMapper will do the things. So we are using AutoMapper. That doesn't mean it will do everything automatically, right? AutoMapper will do the things automatically, but to do the things automatically, we need to give the instruction to the AutoMapper. The instruction, the information which is required by the AutoMapper, that is what we need to give to the AutoMapper. Once we provide those things, then the things will be do automatically for us, right? Let us understand how we can use AutoMapper to map the object, right? So basically, what is our requirement? As you know, we are having two types. One is employee, another one is employee TTO, and we need the AutoMapper to map this name property with name property, salary with salary, address with the address, department with the department. So basically, I'm starting with a simple example, right? As always, and then gradually we will move toward the more and more complex example. And at the end of this session, you will definitely having a very good understanding of how to use AutoMapper in your project, right? So basically, what is our requirement? Our requirement is this is my employee class, and this is going to be my source class, and this is my employee DTO class. This is going to be my destination class. So what is my requirement? I want to map this name property of the employee object with the name property of an employee DTO object. I'm providing this name as a DTO, means data transfer object, and this is basically going to be transfer the data from my my application to a different application. And this is salary property. This salary property should map with the salary property, and address with the address, and a department with a department property. That is what my requirement. I'm starting with the very basic example, and then we'll move toward the more and more complex example. So what is the first step? The first step is to install AutoMapper, right? Already I have installed AutoMapper on my application. And if you want to install AutoMapper, what you need to do? Select a NuGet Package Manager console, right? You can go with install a package manager console window, right? And here you can write install package AutoMapper. This is one of the option, right? Install package AutoMapper. But in this case, so what problem you will face? It will try to install the latest version of AutoMapper, and the latest version of AutoMapper is 12.0.1, which is not supported with .NET Framework 4.8, which is the latest version. This framework, AutoMapper 12.0.1, is basically used with your .NET core, right? So you cannot use this AutoMapper with your .NET Framework 4.8. So what is the other solution? How I can use AutoMapper in my existing project? So basically, the compatible version for .NET Framework 4.8 is AutoMapper 10.0.1. So what you need to do, go to manage NuGet package for solution, right? And then here you need to search AutoMapper, right? This is the AutoMapper, right? Once you select the AutoMapper, then what you need to do, you need to provide this option, select the project where you need to install, right? And from this version, you need to select 10.0.1. This is the version which is compatible with your .NET Framework 4.8. Once you select this, already I have installed. That's why you can see on install button is showing, and in your case it will show you the install button, right? Once you click on the install button, then accept the license, right? It will ask for, once you accept, then AutoMapper will be installed. And then if you go to the reference folder, then you will see the AutoMapper DL. And if you check the version, then you will see this is nothing but your 10 version 10, right? So this is how you need to install AutoMapper. Any question from anyone how to install AutoMapper? Guys?
No, sir.
No, good. No, sir.
Okay. Now, So once you install the AutoMapper, then the second thing that what we need to understand is how we need to use the AutoMapper. So before using AutoMapper, what we need to do, we need to configure and initialize AutoMapper in our project. So first of all, we need to configure and then we need to initialize the AutoMapper. How we are going to configure the AutoMapper, how we are going to initialize the AutoMapper. For that, let us first see how we can configure. See, you can see this image. To configure the AutoMapper, what you need to do, you need to create an instance of a mapper configuration class. And while creating the instance of a mapper configuration class, using the Lambda expression and using the create map method, you need to provide the type. You need to provide the what is your source type and what is your destination type. So this is the syntax. How to create an instance of a class, you know, using the new operator. New mapper configuration. We need to create an instance of mapper configuration. So new mapper configuration. And to this constructor, we need to provide the type. So what is the type? What is your source type and what is your destination type? So if you want to provide mapping for multiple types, then you just need to put a comma and any number of types you want to configure, you can configure. See, using this create map method, I need to configure my two classes. What should be the source class and what should be the destination class? In my case, the source class is going to be employee and the destination class is going to be employee DTO. So what I need to do, I need to create the mapper configuration instance like this. So new mapper configuration using Lambda expression, I need to call the generic create map method, and this create map method takes two types. One is the T source and another one is the T destination. And here T source is nothing but employee and T destination, it is nothing but employee DTO. Once you create this employee, once you configure this mapper, right? Once you have done the mapper configuration, second step, you need to create an instance, right, of the mapper object. And to create an instance of the mapper object, what you need to do, to the constructor of a mapper, you need to pass this config object, and that's it. So for that, for to understand this thing, so what I have done, I have created one class called mapper configuration. Always see, if you are working with a real-time project, so always better to create a separate class for the mapper, right? And inside that class, whatever the configuration is required, you just need to write the configuration. So what I have done, I have created one class called mapper config. Within that class, I have one method. I have created one method called initialize AutoMapper. The return type of this method is going to be mapper, right? Then what I've done, I'm initializing the mapper configuration. So, and you can see to the constructor of this mapper configuration, I have provided my two types. So how you are going to provide the types? By using the create map generic method. And this generic method accepts two parameters, right? Parameter in the sense of two different types. One is T source, another one is T destination. So in this case, T source is going to be employee because employee is going to be my employee is going to be the source object, and then the destination is going to be employee DTO. I want to copy the data from source object to this destination object, right? That is what you need to provide. If you are having more number of configuration to do, then you just need to write like. Clear, guys? Any number of a configuration, you need to do all those configuration here, right? We'll see these things again as we progress in this session, right? Once you have done the mapper configuration, the second step, you need to initialize the mapper, right? So you need to create an instance of a mapper, and to create an instance of a mapper, what you need to do, you need to provide the mapper configuration instance. And here it's very simple and very straightforward. I'm just calling this config object to this mapper. This will initialize the mapper configuration, right? And then I'm just returning that mapper instance. And now and later, using this mapper, I'm going to do the mapping, right? Any question from anyone related to this method? How to use this mapper? That is what I'm going to discuss now. But now I'm just doing two steps. One is um, providing the configuration and initializing the mapper. Clear, guys?
Yeah, that's good.
Right. So this is the second step. First step is you should install AutoMapper. If you do not install AutoMapper, then you cannot use this namespace. First of all, you should install AutoMapper. Second step, see these steps what I'm showing here, you can also directly write where you are going to use the mapper. But I do not prefer that approach. I generally prefer create a separate class for the mapper configuration, create one method, right? That method is going to do all the necessary work. And inside that class, whatever mapping configuration you required, you need to provide using the mapper configuration, create the mapper instance, return the mapper instance. And now wherever you want to use AutoMapper, just call this mapper dot initialize AutoMapper static method that is going to return this mapper instance, and that and using that mapper instance, you can map the two different objects, right? Once this is done, right? Next, what we need to do? Next, we need to use the AutoMapper. How to use the AutoMapper, right? So we have a create and initialize the AutoMapper, but how to use that AutoMapper? That is what next we are going to discuss. So this is my source object, which I got from a different application, right? In that application might be a class library project, WSAP application, or it might be on API who is providing you these details, right? Once you have this data, right, then what you need to do, you want to transfer this employee object to this employee DTO object. But now I'm not going to use this manual mapping or the traditional mapping. I'm not going to create an instance of an employee DTO, and I'm not going to copy the properties one by one from employee to employee DTO. Now what I'm going to use, I want to use AutoMapper. See, this is the class, but to use this class, first of all, you need to initialize this AutoMapper class. So, right? How you are going to initialize this AutoMapper class? You need to call this initialize AutoMapper method of the mapper config class. See, you can say this is a static method of this class. So I want to call this method on this class. That class is going to return me the mapper object, and using that mapper object, I'm going to do the mapping, right? So for that purpose, you need to call the this method. This method is going to return me the mapper object. And once this method return you the mapper object, this mapper object having one method called the map method. Using that map method, you can do the mapping, right? So this is a generic method, and to this generic method, you can pass one or two parameter. If you go to the definition, right, you can see T source or T destination, and also you can also use T destination. So there are a different overloaded version. So you can pass. So currently, in this case, the map method what I'm using, it is expecting one parameter T destination, and we need to pass the object source object. And in this case, which one is your source object? This is your source object. Yes or no? Guys?
Yes.
And this source object, I need to transfer with the destination object. And what is the type of the destination object? The destination object type is employee DTO or employee?
The DTU.
Employee DTO. So what you need to do? So to this map method, you can pass this source object, and within this generic type, right? Here you need to specify the destination type. That's it. And this map method, what it will do, it will take the employee object, it will transfer the properties of the employee object to employee DTO object, and return one instance of employee DTO, which you can store inside a variable. Now, if you look at this employee DTO, then its type is going to be employee DTO. See, what is the type? Employee DTO. This is one of the approach. Second approach, right? If you are, this is one of the approach. Second approach is also there. What approach? Now, in that method, you need to pass both source and a destination. right? If you are passing one type, that will be your destination. If you are passing two types, then it will explicitly tell that this employee object what you are passing is of type employee, and this employee object is going to be transferred to this employee DT. And the once it transfer the employee object to employee DTO, in this case also the method, right, going to return an instance of an employee DTO. And if you check the type, then you will see the type is going to be employee DTO. So using this map method, you can only specify the destination type and the source object. It is also possible to specify both the source and the destination type and the source object. But behind the scene, both are going to do the same thing. Clear, guys?
Yeah. So, sir,
Right.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So the source data might be anything. Let's say it might be data coming from the API.
Exactly.
Okay.
That is coming from a different application.
Okay.
See, if in the same application, then what is the record of this? Right? It is coming from a different application that might be, most of the time you can consider it's an API. One
Okay.
API giving you the data. You need to process the data. After processing the data, you need to transfer the data to a different API. Right? That different API in the sense it might be your web application, Android application, and it might be your what I can say iOS application, some desktop application, right? Most of the time, if you are working with the APIs, then you will use these things. Where you will use this, right? So this is going to be a different application where you are getting the data, right? Or it might be possible that you are using entity framework. Using entity framework, you need to fetch all the properties, right? If you are using entity framework, right? If you are then entity framework, see in your database, you are having one table called employee, right? And for that employee table, it will create a class called employee. Whenever you are using the context class, then it will return you all the employee properties, right? And later you want to pass the employee data to the UI, but you don't want to pass all the properties of the employee. You want to pass few properties of an employee. Then in that case, you cannot simply pass this employee. Then what you need to do, you need to transfer that employee to a different type, and that different type in this case employee DTO, right? So basically, it's depend on your requirement, what exactly you want to do, right? Here, guys.
Yeah.
Yes.
So when running the application, would you mind pressing a breakpoint and then we see how what the data contains?
Sure.
Yeah, good.
Employee object is created, mapper is configured, right? And if you check the mapper, this is nothing but your AutoMapper is initialized. And then using this mapper.map method, you are just converting, right? And once you press F10, then you will see that employee DTO, it is containing the one object, and the value you can say address, department name, and salary, which is nothing but same as your employee object. Right? And here also it is going to do the same thing, right? Employee DTO2, it is also going to do hold the same value. And now if you run these things, then you will see the output. Name, salary, address, and a department. This is just a very simple example, and in this example, we do not have any issue, right? As we progress, then we will see different kind of issues, different kind of problems, and how we are going to overcome such problems, right? So, but this is the steps that you need to follow if you want to use AutoMapper. Step 1, you need to install AutoMapper. Step 2, you need to configure AutoMapper, right? And you need to configure the type for which you want to provide AutoMapper to do the mappings, and while configure, you need to provide the source and the destination type. Then you need to initialize the AutoMapper, and once you initialize the AutoMapper, then using that instance and using the map method, right? In two ways, you can do the mapping using source and destination type, or only by using the destination type. And that's it. And once you do this method, this map method will take the responsibility. This map method now know for this source object, right? What is the type? And for this type, is there any destination object called employee DTO is defined? And what is the source object type? Employee. For this employee, is there any destination type called employee DTO defined in your AutoMapper? Let's go and check. Yes, in AutoMapper, there is an employee DTO, right? For example, let me create another class file here. Employee DTO2, right? And now what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to provide here employee DTO2. Is this going to work? Here you will not get any compile time error, but while it is going to do the mapping, then for this source type employee, it will check the mapper configuration, because this is the mapper object. This mapper object is created based on this configuration, and inside this configuration for the employee type, is there any DTO defined employee DTO to? No, we have not defined any employee DTO2 for this source type. Then when you are when you run this application, this statement will give you the error, because there is no employee DTO2 defined for the employee source object, right? Now run the application. See, missing type map configuration or unsupported mapping. Go to the definition, right? And go to the what it is showing. Okay, let me copy these things. Come to here, right? What mapping information is missing? Missing is AutoMapper.employee DTO. So this mapping is not provided. So this is missing, right? Now, if you want to, map these things. Okay, so what you need to do? You want to configure another here. Okay, so what you need to do? You need to provide employee DTO. With these changes, now run the application. See, you are getting the data. So this is how AutoMapper works. Clear, guys?
Yes, sir.
Right.
Yes. Actually, I have
Now,
one doubt. Can you go to the configuration class of Mapper?
yes.
Here you said that we can have multiple create map, right? So at the
Yeah.
time of creating an instance, in one of the controller, I want to use the first one, the 11th line. I don't want to use the 12th line. So at the time, why we need to
See,
the instance
thing
for
is
both?
that this initialized AutoMapper will be initialized only once, right? So basically what you need to do in real time, just create is initialized equals to false, right? And then check these things.
Okay.
Right? So what do you need to do? Mapper equals to null, right? And then if initialized equals to false, right? So basically you can see it's a static mapper class, right? And you need to check if initialize is already done, then don't initialize the things again. In this example, I'm taking this as static. You can create these things as non-static as well, right? So non-static in the sense you need to remove these things, right? You need to remove these things. You need to remove these things, right? And it becomes non-static. And here, right, every time it will come. Why I'm getting this error? This has read over, right? No, this is wrong. This is not got to be read only. What you need to do once everything is done, you need to make this value as true, right? Once it becomes true, then you can see. Clear? So now what will happen? For the first time, this value will become false. If the value become false, then it will initialize and it will configure the AutoMapper. From the second time onwards, right? From the second time onwards, it is not going to create the mapper again and again. Already the mapper configuration is initialized. It will just return that mapper, right? No, and now, no matter from where from any number of a controller, you call this initialize AutoMapper method. If it is already initialized, then it will not again initialize this, and it doesn't make any sense to initialize this AutoMapper things again and again. One time initialize, that's enough. We just need to tell the AutoMapper that this is my source type, this is my destination type, and this is the mapper object, and now you can use that mapper object any number of time and from anywhere. Clear?
Yes.
Right. So now the second thing what we are going to discuss, what will happen if the source and the destination of property names are different. Currently, the example what we are seeing, you can see name, salary, address, department, the property name, right? They are exactly as it is, and the property names are same. Now, what will happen if we have different property? It is not mandatory that whatever the property name we are getting from the database or I mean from the context class, or whatever property name we are getting from the third party API or from different other application, my DTO class name, property name is going to be same. It's not mandatory. We can create our own name. The property name might be vary. Then in that case, what will happen? Right? So for that purpose, what I'm going to do, I'm going to change the employee DTO object, right? So in employee DTO, what I have done, see, in employee class, the property name is name. And in employee DTO, I have marked this property as full name. Salary address as it is, salary and address as it is, and whatever the department that I have marked as DPT. So this is what, so basically now the two types, the property names are different. Some of the property name here is name, there is full name, here is department, and there is DPT. If this is the case, then what will happen? Right? So this is mapper config. This employee detail we have deleted. Right? So with this change, what I need to do, I also need to do some changes in this class, because now this is not a static method anymore. This is going to be a non-static method, right? So you need to create an instance. And in employee detail, now there is no name property, there is full name, and there is also not a department. The property name is going to be department. These changes we need to do because we have changed the property name, right? Now, so now if you run the application, then what will happen? Let me run the application and show you the output. See, name and department values are coming or not?
Not
Nope.
coming.
Not coming. So the point that you need to remember is, while using AutoMapper, right? While using AutoMapper, if the property name are same, then it is automatically map those property values. In this case, salary and address, the property names are same. This is the default naming convention which is followed by AutoMapper. If the property names are same, that is in this case salary and in this case address, in this case salary address, so these two property values are mapped. But the other two property values, name and department, they are not mapped. They are not mapped, and hence you can see they are not showing in the output. And in this case, as they are not mapped, then based on the data type, the default value they are going to hold. For the string type, what is the default value? Null. Null you cannot see. So that's why you can see here null is not printing and here department value is not printing. So this is the default naming convention that if the property names are same, then only it will map the values. Otherwise, it will not map the values. Now the question is how I can overcome this problem. How I can overcome this problem, right? So how I can overcome this problem means now my requirement is this is the class what I'm getting, or this is the property names what I'm getting from the context class, from the database, from the third party API, from the WCF service. But I want to return this name to the UI. I have already created the signature and provided the signature to the UI team. They are already started implementing using this signature. Now I cannot provide this name and department. I have to provide this full name and department. But in the employee class, the property names are name and department. How we can do this? Is this possible? Because if I'm going with manual mapping, then I can do this manually. I can copy this name property value with this full name property value with the traditional approach. But now I'm not using traditional approach. I'm using AutoMapper. Then how I can do this using AutoMapper? First of all, is this possible? Yes, it is possible. How? Let's see. So for that, what we need to use? We need to use the for member method. And using the for member method, you need to provide what is the destination property name, and for this destination property, what is the source property name, from which source property you want to map the data to this destination property. And this is what you can use using the for member and map from method, right? So now let me modify the context class. You can see this is my DTO. So this is my employee DTO, right? This is my employee DTO, employee class and employee DTO. I'm providing configuration these two. Earlier, I'm not, earlier I have used the semicolon. Now I'm not going to use the semicolon, right? What I'm going to use, I'm going to use the concept called method chaining. And we have already discussed what is method chaining. I'm not going to discuss method chaining again and again here. What is method chaining? Method chaining means I'm calling the method one after another using the dot operator. Here you can see this is create map method. On at the end of this create map method, I'm calling another method. And then I'm calling another method using the dot operator. And whenever you are calling the method one after another using the dot operator, this concept is nothing but your method chaining. We have already discussed, right? So now you can see what I need to do. Whenever you want to map the properties manually, and if the property names are different in your source and destination type, then you need to use the for member method. So for this member, for this name, this is your source property name or destination property name? Guys, employee. Employee your source type or destination type?
Source.
And what is the destination type name for that property? Full name. So I want to map this name property value with this full name property value. Right? For that purpose, what you need to do, using this for number method, you need to specify what is your destination property name. I have provided the destination property name is full name, and this destination property name, then you need to provide one action delegate. And using that action delegate, I'm using another method for that is called a map from. So this full name property will be mapped from, this is the source property name. What is the source property name? In the employee type, what is the property name? Name. So in this case, this full name property of the destination object will be mapped from the source property name. Clear?
Yes, sir.
And then again, we are having a different property department, and I want to map this department with the destination property DPT. What is the destination property name? DPT. So DST dot DPT. This is my destination. See, whenever I'm using this thing, always you need to use lambda expression, right? Then I'm using DS. So this is my department. I mean, this is the destination property name, and this destination property value will be mapped from the source property name department. Source property called the department. So with these changes, what will happen now? Whatever the name property, I mean, what is the name property value of the source object will be mapped with the full name property value, and the value of a department property will be mapped with the DPT value, right? Now let me do the changes, right? Now run the application and see whether the values are going to be displayed as expected or not. See, now gems and the department is showing or not? Yes, it is showing. So basically, whenever the property names are same, they are going to be mapped as it is. If the property names are different between the source and the destination object, then you need to use this for member and a map from method. So using for member, first property is nothing but your destination property. Then you need to specify the source property from where you need to map the value. Clear, guys?
Yes.
Any question from anyone?
No, sir.
Okay.
Sir, one question here. So if the property type like we are converting into byte, so in that case, will that work or we need to do any additional thing?
See, first of all, you just tell me int to byte. The typecasting, you know,
Yes, yes.
so it's the same concept is going to be applicable here now.
Okay, sir.
So typecasting means if you are storing some into, I mean into byte, then there is a chance of a data loss, right? So you need to typecast. Okay.
Yes.
So the see, this is not a different thing, right? So if you know what is typecasting, when the automatic typecasting will come into the picture, when explicit typecasting will come into the picture, the same thing is also applicable here. This is not a different thing. We are still learning the C# language, right? C# language means the concept is going to be same to each and everything, right? To everyone, every concept. So the next important thing what we are going to discuss is nested mapping, or you can say AutoMapper complex mapping. AutoMapper complex mapping means what? Now when both types, right, source and destination involved in the mapping contains properties of the complex type, then in such scenarios we need to use AutoMapper complex mapping. So let us understand this thing, right? The example what we have discussed now, they are contain some primitive types values. So here you can say all those four properties are primitive type. Here also all those four properties are primitive type. Primitive means they can hold the value directly. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to introduce some interesting things. Interesting means I'm going to make the example more complex. More complex in the sense, don't think that always the DTO is going to hold only properties of a primitive type. It is also possible that you are creating one JSON object. Within that JSON object, you are creating another JSON object. That means JSON array. So in that case, your complex type, right? So if you say it is not always possible that the class type going to contain the properties are of a primitive type. Sometimes it is also possible to store some reference type. For example, if you see this employee class having, this is my source object, name, salary, department, and also one reference type called address. And this is the address type, and this address type contains some properties called city, state, and the country. And the employee DTO also containing the same structure, name, salary, department, but here the name is address DTO, and here the address DTO also contain the same properties, city, state, and country. Now I want to map this employee with the employee DTO. Is this possible? Yes, this is possible. How? Let's see. So first of all, let me create the required model classes. This is my address class, right? This is my address class containing city, state, and country. This is my employee class. Employee class going to contain 3 primitive properties and 1 reference properties called address, right? Now I'm going to create another class called address DTO, and this is my address DTO, right? This address DTO contains city, state, and the country, and then I'm creating the employee DTO, which is going to contain address DTO reference type. So now if you see the structure of all this employee and the employee DTO are going to be same, right? So address containing city, state, country properties, address DTO containing the same city, state, and country properties. Employee containing name, salary, department, and address property, and employee DTO also contain name, salary, department, and address property. That means the property name in employee DTO, address, and address DTO are going to be same. Clear, guys? So this is what we have done. Now, what we need to do? We need to map this employee object with the employee DTO object. Let me first do modify the configuration file, right? So in the configuration file, I'm providing employee is the source object, employee DTO is the destination object, right? Now what we need to do, we need to change the main method, right? So main method in the sense, I'm creating one address object. I'm associating that address object with the employee object, right? And then I'm initializing the AutoMapper, calling the map method, right? Other option is there, right? You can also use this overloaded version, which takes both the source and the destination object, and I'm mapping. Once I'm doing the mapping, then what I'm doing, I'm just printing the employee DTO name, salary, department, and then I'm printing the city, state, and the country, right? Now let me run the application, see what happens. So in this case, you will get one error. Okay. So what error he is saying? Error mapping types. Inner exception, AutoMapper mapping, missing type map configuration, or unsupported mapping. So guys, whenever you are getting this AutoMapper mapping mapping exception, it means you are missing some mapping configuration, right? If you go to the inner exception, copy the error message, right? And open this error message in the notepad. So what he is saying, the missing type configuration or unsupported mapping types, what are the mapping information missing? Address and address DTO. Do we have mapped these two complex types in our application? And also it is saying AutoMapper demo. AutoMapper demo, this is nothing but your namespace, address is nothing but your class name. This mapping is mapped, is missing with this address detail. That means what he is saying you are getting this exception because while I'm going to map the employee object with the employee DTO, I found some complex type within those types. I found some complex type within those types. So in this case, employee is a type, right? Employee is a type, and within this employee type, I found another complex type called address, and there is no mapping between this address property, right? This is the address property. And if you go to the employee detail, there is also address property. While I'm going to map this address property with this address property, I could not find the mapping between address and address detail. That means what? Now, if your nested, if your complex type, this is the complex type, This is also a complex type, or you can say this is the nested complex type, right? Whenever you are having nested complex type, and if you want to map those nested complex type, then also you need to configure those mappings, right? So that's basically what you need to do is you not only need to configure employee with employee DTO, also you need to configure address with the address DTO, right? So once you need to configure these two also. See, what I can say, before AutoMapper 8.0, there is a strictly rule. If you are using nested type, they should be above the employee and employee detail. But with the current after 8.0, right, there is no such issue, right? So now you can put this address detail above the employee detail or below the employee and employee detail, there is no issue, right? So with this mapping, right, now run the application and check whether you are getting the output as expected or not. You are getting the data? Yes or no?
Yes.
Right. So the
Yes.
point that you need to remember, guys, give me 1 minute. Okay. So, what are the points we need to remember? First of all, if the property names are same, then automatically it will do the mapping. If the property names are different, then we need to use for member and map from method to map the properties. If the type contains some nested types means in this case employee is a type and this employee type contains another type called address. So in this case address is a nested type. If the type contains some nested type, then the mapping for the nested type is also mandatory. And that is what we have done here. So these are the three things or 3 points that you need to remember. First one, the property name is, if the property name is same, automatically mapping will be done. If the property name is different, then we need to manually tell the entity or tell the AutoMapper, hey, Mr. AutoMapper, this is my destination property. Please map this value from this source property using the for member method. And if your type contains some nested type, then also we need to map those nested types in the configuration. Clear, guys? Guys?
Yes.
Yeah. Next. Okay. What happens if we change the complex type property names, right? So what happens if we change the complex type property names, right? So what it means? It means if you see currently the complex property names, right? In the employee type, what is the property name? Address. In the employee DTO, what is the property name? Address. So currently they are same type. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to make this property name as address DTO. Now the complex property type names are different. Same or different. In employee type, it is address. In employee DTO, it is going to be address DTO. Right? Then what do I need to do here? I need to use address DTO. And here I need to use address DTO, right? With these changes, let me run the application. Do you think that, guys, in this case, it will give you the output?
No, sir. For address, it will not print.
Okay. So in this case, we are getting one exception called null reference exception. Can anybody tell me why we are getting this exception?
There is no value. Instead of no value, we are trying to access that property. So at the time, we will get the null value.
So why there is no value in the address detail?
I think the problem was because we changed its property name.
Exactly. See, so what we discussed, if the property names are same, then automatically it will map the value. If the property names are different, do you think it will automatically map the values?
No, we need to configure that
It will
manually.
not automatically map the values. If it will not automatically map the values, then what the property is going to hold? The property is going to hold the default value based on the data type. And in this case, this address DTO, right? This address DTO type is what? It's address DTO. It is a reference type. And for reference type, what is the default value? Null. And on a
No.
null object, if you are trying to access anything, then what error you will get? What exception you will get? You will get null reference exception. Clear?
Yes.
Right. So the point that you need to remember, whether it is a simple type, right, like name, salary, department, or whether it's a complex type like address, if the property name are same, then it will map them automatically. If the property name are different, then it will not map them. In this case, name, salary, department, the values will be mapped. For address, the name are different. So it will not map the value. So in this case, address DTO will hold the null value, and on the null, you are trying to access the city, state, and country. That's why you are getting the error. Now, how to solve this? So how to solve this means we need to use the for member method, right? So, and you know how to use the for member method, right? So So you need to use the for member method. You can see using the for member method on this employee and employee DTO object, you need to tell what is the destination type. The destination type is address DTO, and you want to map the values from the address property of the source object. That is what you need to tell. So here, this is the destination property name, and that property will be mapped from this property of the source object. Right? That means what? Whether it is a simple type or whether it is a complex type, if the names are different, then you have to use this for member method to map them, right? So now run the application and see the output. You are getting the data. Clear, guys?
Yes, sir.
Right? So this is another important point that you need to remember while working with this thing. Now let us try to make this example more interesting. What happens if the complex type property names are different, right? Currently, right, if you look at the address DTO, right, currently address DTO, the property name is city, state, and country. Let me change. I'm now making the property name as a employee city, employee state, and employee city, state, and country. So then we need to do the changes also here, where I have done the changes. Oh, sorry. This is not the place. I need to change the changes here, right? So currently you can see I have made the property names are, so this is address. Address, this is nested type containing city, state, and country. Here address DTO contains what? Employee city, employee state, and a country. right? So once I have done these changes, then also I need to change here because we have modified the property name and we have modified the property name. So with these changes and with this configuration, what will happen? Can anybody tell me? Now, do you think that we are getting the value for employee city and state properties?
No, sir.
No. Why? Because the property names are different in these two types. Then how you can expect city and state to be there? So you can see city and state property value is not there. Now, you guys tell me where I need to do the changes.
Number 11.
Number 11. Here I need to provide the information for those two different properties, right? What is the source property name? One is EMP and this will be coming from the city property of the sorry, the destination property name is city and it will be coming from the city property. And here the destination property name is employee state and the source property state will give you the value. So with these two changes, right, this is one mapping information and this is another mapping information, right? So with these two changes, now run the application and see the outcome. You are getting the data. See whether first of all the property name should be same. If same, then it is automatically map the value. If it contains some complex property, see in this example, this is name salary department and name salary department. They are same, so it will automatically map the value. For complex property, the mapping should be there, right? Address DTO and address. So we need to map them, right? So here we are mapping address with address DTO. If the complex property names are same, then that is fine. If complex property names are different, in this case, you can see different, then also we need to map them, right? Different means map. And again, whenever you are using the nested types, right, address and address DTO, again, you need to check whether the two types property names are same or different. In this case, country, and in this case, country, same. But other two, city and state, they are different. So you need to provide mapping for those different property names. Clear? Or any question from anyone? Nice.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. So this is all about how you can map complex properties, right? So nested types or complex property. Now we are going to discuss some more interesting and more complex examples. Complex examples means we are going to discuss how to map complex type to primitive type using AutoMapper, right? Complex type to primitive type using AutoMapper. For understanding, let's assume that we are having three classes. One is employee, employee DTO, and address. And in the employee class, we are having the data like this. See, this is the suppose you are calling one API, and in that API, one array will come, one JSON object is written. Inside that JSON object, you are getting the data in the form of name, salary, department. Within that JSON object, another JSON object is there, and that JSON object, yeah, it is containing the address data like this. So you created two classes to store those data, right? So this is your source object. In your source object, you are having employee and address. But what the client want, what the client don't want the address or the JSON object. The way you are storing, the client doesn't want the data in that way. The client wants the data to be in this way. The client want, I don't want another complex object, another JSON object within one JSON object. I just need the data in one object. That means what? Now you now need to, instead of address, you just need to provide the data like this. So I need to create one employee TTO, name, salary, department, city, state, country with 6 properties, and these two are my source object. And I need to map this address object to this one. That means what? Now how we are going to map the complex type to primitive types using AutoMapper. That is what we need to discuss. Clear? What is our requirement? You guys understand? Guys?
Yes, understood.
Right? Okay. So let me first create the classes. One is address class. Address is going to be city, state, and country. And one is employee class. And in employee class, it is having the address property, right, as it is. And now we don't need address DTO. And instead of address DTO, we want all those properties within the employee DTO. So this is our classes. Right. So basically what we need to do, if you see name salary department, property name are same, name salary department, for these three property, there is no issue. And now it is containing one complex type, but does this class having any complex type? No. This DTO class doesn't have any complex type. Then what we need to do? We need to map the properties of this address object to this individual properties. And that is nothing but how we are going to map the complex type to primitive types using AutoMapper. Let's see how we can do this. So the changes, right? Whatever configuration means, you need to go to the mapper class, right? See, so first of all, okay, let me split these things. So this is my create map method. You need to provide the source and the destination type. In the destination, there is a property called city. In the destination object, there is a property called city, and you want to map this property city, right, from the address object. But if you go to the address object, it's a complex type, and in address object, there is some properties called city, state, and country. So from which property you want to map? I want to map the city property of the address object, right? So what you need to do, you need to write this. So now previously, see, if it's not a complex property, you can access that property directly. Okay, to give you an idea, so here employee, so what I can say, I will write this as employee name. So now name is here and employee full name is here. So basically, we need to also provide the configuration for those properties because those are different. So in that case, what you need to do here is, here it is full name, and this will be returned from the name property, right? Because this is a primitive type, you can so you can directly access like this. Although a string is a reference type, but it will behave like a primitive data type because they hold the value directly, right? And now you want to map the city property of the destination object, but from where you will get the value? For this city property, from where you will get the value? I will get the value from this address property only. But what is the type of this address property? It's a complex type. It's not a primitive type like string int boolean, right? It's a complex type. Let's go to the definition of this type. Yes, within this type, there is a property called city, and I want to map that value, right? And for that, you need to write address.city. And the same thing for state and a country. So address.state, address.country. And finally, you need to create the instance and return the instance. Clear, guys?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Right? Next, what we need to do? We need to modify the method, right? And now there is no complex property in the employee DTO. And here we have changed that name to full name. So I just write full name, right? Employee DTO dot full name, salary, state, city, country, everything is there, right? And this is my address object. I'm mapping that address with the employee object. These two are nothing but my source. So now, see, in this case, you will not get any issues. Even though one type contains the complex type, but other type doesn't complex context type. So that means what? I'm not going to configure this address type with anyone because there is no such complex property available within this DTO class, right? So rather what I'm doing, I'm just mapping this address with the individual property of the employee DTO. And how I'm going doing this? I'm using this per member method. I'm mapping those things, right? Now run the application and see the output. Getting the output as expected? Yes or no?
Yes.
So basically, this is how you can map a complex type to primitive types. Clear, guys?
Yes, clear.
Okay. Now the reverse thing, right? Reverse things means what? Now we will see how we can map primitive type to a complex type, right? In the previous example, if you look at the previous example here, the DTO contains only primitive types, and we are mapping this complex type to the primitive types. Now, the example is the opposite. Now, the source object contains primitive type, and we want to map these primitive types to a complex type called address. How you can do this? Right? For this, let us first modify the classes, right? Because initially employee class contains the address property. Now we are moving that address property, and now the DTO class going to contain the, what I can say, DTO class is going to contain the complex property, and as it is, we are going to use this as full name, right? So this is the changes, right? Now, how we are going to configure these things? And it's very simple and very straightforward. Let me copy these things. Right? So in our DTO, it is full name, and full name should be mapped from name property. And that is what the first mapping is all about, mapping name with the full name. And in the second thing, right, in the destination object, we are having one property called address. Which type of a property is this? This is a reference object. This is a reference property. That means what? We need to create an instance of this class to store the values. And the values will be coming from where? The values will be coming from the source object, city, state, and country primitive properties. And that is what I'm doing here. This is my destination object, right? And to this, and this is my destination property. And I'm creating an instance of this type and getting the value from the source type, city, state, and country properties. And within this address property, there is city, state, and country properties, and I'm initializing them, right? If you want to provide a different name, right? Suppose city is there, you are just giving this as EMP city. That is also fine. So what you need to do, you just need to give this as EMP city, right? Right, so property name, whatever you can assign those things, right? So basically you need to use one object and initialize those properties from the source object. SRC here referring to the source object employee, and in source object there is a property called the city, state, and the country. If you are creating an instance of address, in address whatever the property, those property you can access here, right? And once you have done these changes, then what you need to do, you need to modify the main method, right? So here the name, it is going to be full name. City, we have changed the name to EMP city. Rest of the thing is going to be same. Here you can see this is my employee object, which contains only primitive data types. Now employee DTO contain both these properties in the employee object, and in the address object, it is going to store the data, right? For let me run this in debug mode so that I can show you these things. F10, F10. Now, if you look at this employee DTO, then you can see department full name salary as it is and address. You can see country EMP city and states right from the application, and you will see the output. Clear, guys? How to map from complex type to primitive types and how to map primitive type to complex types. Any question from anyone? Guys, any question from anyone?
No, sir.
Okay. Right. So the next things what we are going to discuss is AutoMapper or reverse mapping, right? The mapping what we have discussed so far, right? If you see the mapping, what we have discussed so far, in this mapping, only employee will act as the source object and employee DTO is going to act as the destination object. Means from this employee object, I can only map the data to the employee DTO object. But the reverse is not possible. I cannot map this employee DTO with the employee object, right? Because the way we have written the code, it is only one directional from employee to employee DTO. But the reverse is not possible. Now, if you want, then you can also implement the reverse map. Right? Reverse mapping means a two-way mapping, bidirectional mapping. If you are mapping from type A with type B, then also with reverse mapping, you can map type B with type A, right? And that is possible because of the reverse mapping. So there is a method called reverse map, and using that method, you can do these things, right? Let's see how we can implement this. For this, we are going to create a different example. Let me add the customer class. Okay, let me first remove all these things. So there is a class called customer. Here you can see this is a simple class having four properties: customer ID, full name, postcode and postal code, and a contact number, right? And then I'm creating one class called order. And whenever a customer places one order, right, that order information we want to store, right? This is my customer order. Order number of items, total amount, and this order is placed by which customer, that customer detail. And that customer details is nothing but your customer ID, full name, postal code, and contact number. And the next one is order DTO, right? Order DTO, this is nothing but my order DTO. See, here you can see order ID, number of items, total amount, customer ID, name, postal code, and mobile number. Here you can see this is contain only the primitive types, and here it is containing order number of items, total amount, primitive type, as well as a complex type, right? And this complex type contains the information of customer ID, full name, postal code, and a reference number. Further, here order ID and here order number. That means the name is also different, right? And here customer ID and here customer ID also there, but here customer ID in small letter and here it is in capital letter, right? So these are the entity classes. Now we'll see how we can implement AutoMapper reverse map, right? So what basically you need to do is right. So order with order DTO, we are going to map. So forget about reverse map. First, let us see what is order map. So order ID is different. So map them using the per member method. So order ID in the destination object will be mapped with the order number of the source object. Because if you check order number, so order table, here the property name is order number, here the property name is order ID, right? And then what we need to do is we need to do customer mapping, right? So here you can see this is a complex type and we need to map this complex type with the primitive types. So these are nothing but your primitive types. And we have already discussed how to do these things, right? So basically what you need to do, name is coming from the customer table full name, customer full name, right? If you see, this is having the full name, this full name is mapped with the name property, right? Similarly, postcode is mapped with the postcode contact number. In customer table, there is a contact number property, and I want to map that contact number with the mobile number property of my order T2. And that is what contact number is mapped with the mobile number, and here customer ID is mapped with the customer ID. Once you have done these mappings, right, then what you need to do, just call this reverse map. Once you call this reverse map method, then what will happen? Whatever mapping you provided, the reverse is also going to be same. That means order number, order ID of order DTO will be mapped to order number. Name will be mapped to full name. Postcode is mapped to postcode. Mobile number is mapped to contact number. Customer ID will map to customer ID. Right, and for the order table, whatever the property same, right, number of items and the total amount, they are also going to map into these two properties, right? So reverse mapping means bi-directional mapping, two-way mapping. Now you can make order as the source object and order DTO as the destination object. Also, order DTO as the source object and order as the destination object. Is that clear? Right.
Yes, sir, clear.
Now, let us see. See, basically, you just need to call this reverse map method to make the mapping bi-direction, right? Next, what we need to do, we need to test whether this is working as expected or not, right? So basically, what we need to do, we need to do some changes in the main method of the program class, right? Right. So basically here I have created two methods. One method is a create order request. And the first example, what I'm showing, I'm making order as the source object. And in order, if you see order number of items and the total amount. So order number is 101, number of items is this, total amount is this. And within this order, I'm creating the customer object, right? I'm creating the customer object and I'm specifying the customer ID is this, full name is this, postcode and contact number. This is my order request, right? Then what I'm doing from the main method, I'm first initializing the AutoMapper. What you need to do, just call the initialize after AutoMapper static method on the mapper config class. This will return you the mapper object and that you are storing here. And then I'm creating the order request. This is going to be initially, this is the source object. And then I'm mapping the order object with the order TTO object, right? And this mapping will be done because in this case, order TTO contains one complex type and order DTO contains only primitive type. That means we need to map this complex type to primitive types and those mapping information we have provided here, right? Then what I'm doing, in two ways you can do this. You can provide order TTO, or you can also write the query like this, where you just need to specify the destination object. This overloaded version is also work fine, right? Then what I'm doing here, I'm printing the order DTO data, right? So after mapping, so what I'm doing, I'm after mapping, what is the order DTO? Order ID, number of item, total amount, customer ID, name, postcode, mobile number, right? Whatever the data, order request, object content, all those data I'm printing here. After printing, what I'm doing, I'm modifying the order data. After this, what I'm doing, I'm modifying the order data, order details. See, initially, whatever the order request content, that order ID, number of items, total amount, customer ID, name, postcode, this information I have modified. Once I have modified, now what I want is, I want the reverse mapping. And we have already the mapper. And we know this is a map method. And if you go to the definition of this object, right, it takes two parameters. One is source and one is destination. Earlier, what overloaded method we have discussed, in that case, we are just passing the source object and only the source object, right? The example so far we have discussed, we are passing the source object, and in that case, it will create the destination object and will map the data. But in this case, we are passing not only the source object, but the destination object. What it means? It means whatever the order data that are also mapped with the order request object. So in this case, order data, what is the type? The type is order DTO will act as the source object, and what is order request? Order request type is order will act as the destination object. So in this case, after this mapping, then you will see that whatever modification we have done with our order DTO, those are going to be printed here, right? Let me run the application and see the output. See, order ID 101, 300, these things, but then we have changed the data, right? We have changed order ID, 10 number of items 20. And whenever I'm after reverse mapping, you can see the order object, right? The order data 10, 20, 200. That means whatever changes we have done, those are also mapped to this order request object or not. But we have not mapped anything. But what we have done, we have implemented this reverse mapping. So with this reverse mapping, this method is going to work. Now let me do one thing. Comment this one. Right. So once you comment this one, now this method will not work because there is no such mapping defined where order DTO will act as the source object and order request will act as the destination object. Now let me run the application. What it is saying, missing type map configuration or unsupported mapping. And if you go to the definition, then it is clearly showing, right? Let me copy these things. Right, order DTO with order. This mapping is missing. You do not provide any mapping where order DTO is the source object and order is the destination object. And this is makes sense because in our code, do you provide any mapping where you mention order DTO as the source object and order as the destination object? No, we have not provided. But if you want to make that to a mapping, then you just need to call this reverse map method. Clear, guys?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
But
Clear.
what doubt is there?
Sorry?
Hello.
Yeah, tell me. Ask me.
Sir, one doubt is there where we can use this like in real life scenario where we can use reverse map. Uh,
Exactly. So reverse mapping is basically, it is one type of scenario, right? Suppose you are getting the data in the form of order, right? And once you get the data, and I mean, what I can say, if you look at this example, this is the original data what I got from the database, from the third-party API. After once I got this order data, right, this is the data what I got from the API. Once I got the data, I have modified that data, right, modified the data in the sense, uh, not modify exactly, we have just mapped that data to order DTO. And once we mapped the data, then we have done some kind of a processing. After the processing, now what is my requirement? I want to store this data into the database, right? And for that purpose, I cannot use this order DTO, right? For that purpose, I need to use order. Suppose you are creating the context class, right? And this order object is created based on the context class. And based on that order request, you are getting the data from the database. Then you convert that order request with the order DTO. And this order DTO, you are processing these informations. and then you provided this information to the UI or any client. But what now your requirement is, you also want to store this data in your database. Then what you need to do, if you want to store this database, then you cannot use order DTO in your context class, because order DTO is not related with the context class. Which one is related with the context class? Order is the class which is related with the context class. Order is the class which is created by the entity framework. Order DTO you just created for your own purpose. So you, then what you need to do? Then you need to hand over the data which is stored in order DTO with this order object or not? Yes or no?
Yes.
Then for that purpose, what you need to do? You need to use reverse. Clear?
Okay, sir. Understood.
Okay, fine. So now this is working fine as expected. Now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to modify the order and the order DTO, right? Let me modify the order, right? This is my order class. Here I have included all the primitive properties, and in order DTO, what I'm doing in order DTO, I'm modifying these things, right? I'm modifying, and now order DTO containing this customer. Now, so now what we need to do, we just need to call the, so now the order containing primitive type, order DTO contains the a reference type. That means what kind of mapping we need to do? Primitive to complex mapping, right? For that purpose, what I need to do, order ID, order number, that is fine. And here I'm creating the customer object. Guys, give me 1 minute. Right? So now it is primitive type to complex type, right? So basically you need to use primitive type to complex type mapping. And this is what we have already discussed. This is my customer object. You need to create an instance of customer object, and from the source object, you need to specify what property you need to map with the complex type properties, right? So customer ID will be mapped with the customer ID, name will be mapped with the full name, postcode will be mapped with the postcode, mobile number will be mapped with the contact number. And then you are thus calling the reverse map method. So this is the changes what you have done in the what I can say in the mapper configuration. Now let me modify the main method, because we have done some changes, so we need to modify the changes, right? So here you can see I'm creating an order request, and here now the order object doesn't contain any complex type, so I'm creating the order object and returning that. And here what I'm doing, I'm initializing the mapper, creating the order request, mapping the order with order DTO, printing the order DTO, then modifying the order DTO. After modifying, I'm doing the reverse mapping. After reverse mapping, I'm printing the order request data. But now run the application and you will see something is working and something is not going to work. Let me show you these things, right? So in this case, you can see order ID, number of items, total amount. These three are the primitive type properties. After reverse mapping, these three are working, because in this case, you can see order ID, number of items, total amount. These things, whatever value we have said, those things are working, right? Order ID, number of items, total amount, whatever we modify, those modification is here. But what about the customer ID, full name, postal code, and contact number? Customer ID, name, postcode, and mobile number. Why these are not reflected? These are not reflected. Why? Because of the complex mapping, right? So because of the complex mapping, these things are not reflected, right? So basically your order DTO contains one complex type, and in your order entity, right, we are having the primitive type. That means what? We need to do the mapping from complex type to primitive type. Do you have done that mapping here? Complex type to primitive type? No, we have not done the mapping here, and this is the reason why it is not working as expected, right? So basically what we need to do is we also need to do the complex mapping. So complex mapping means we just need to, after the reverse map method, we need to do these things, right? After the reverse map method, what we need to do, we need to specify this is my destination object, right? After C, initially, okay, let me tell you one thing. So in this for member, which one is the destination object? Guys, for this for member method, which is line number 12, which one is the destination object and which one is the source object? Guys,
The order is the destination and the DTO is the destination is the DTO and the order is the source.
yes. Order is the source object and order DTO is the destination object. But the thing will be changed after this reverse map method. So once you call this reverse map method, then for this for member method, which is your line number 21, in this case, the source will be order DTO and the destination will be order object. And now if you are going to compare order with order DTO, so this is my order object, this is my order DTO, then order DTO is the source object and source object contains some complex property, and order DTO does not contain any complex property, it is containing all the primitive property. That means, do you think that this customer data will automatically store on these properties? Or for that purpose, we need to go for complex to primitive mapping. We have already discussed now. We need to go for complex to primitive mapping, because if you are storing one entity storing complex data, then automatically those data will not come and sit here. We need to map those information, and for that purpose we are using these things, right? And this is nothing but your complex to primitive mapping. So here, this is your primitive type, and this customer ID value will come from the customer object customer ID. Name will come from the customer object full name property. So for this, from this to this, order is the order is the source object. Order DTO is the source destination object. But after reverse map, the things is reversed. That means what? The order is going to be the destination object and order DTO is going to be the source object. And this reverse mapping, if you are implementing reverse mapping, and if your if your source object contains some custom class, and if you want to map those property to the primitive types of the destination object, right, then you need to go with this complex to primitive mapping. And with this mapping, right now, if you run the application, then you will see both the mappings are going to be work as expected. Let me run the application. Now you can see this value, whatever you update, those updated data you are finding with the order DTO or order object or not. You are getting the order object. Clear, guys?
Yes, sir.
Right?
So this is how you need to work with reverse mapping. If the property contains only simple type, then it is working as expected. But if your source contains some complex type and destination contains some primitive type, then after reverse map, again, you need to map those mappings, right? So this is what I'm showing. Yeah, right. The next important things what we are going to discuss is, okay, guys, take a break for 5 minutes. Then we'll continue the next topic, next concept discussion. Right? Takes a break for 5 minutes. Is that fine, guys?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Take
sir.
a break for 5 minutes. We'll be back exactly at 9 a.m. Welcome back, guys. All are back.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. So few more concepts are still remaining, which we need to discuss related to AutoMapper. One is conditional mapping. So what is conditional mapping? See, whenever we are doing the traditional mapping, or you can say manual mapping, then you have that flexibility. Flexibility in the sense, you can say that if the number of quantity available is greater than 10, then only I need to map the value, right? If the amount is greater than this, then I only need to map the value. If the product name is start with this letter, then I need to map the value, right? If this value contains this thing, then I need to map this. Otherwise, I need to map that, right? If the quantity is greater than 100, then I need to map this value A. Else, I need to map the value B. That means all those conditional things you can do easily while you are doing the what I can say traditional mapping or manual mapping. Then the question comes here: can you do the same thing using AutoMapper? See, if we are doing the mapping, then whatever we can do using the manual mapping, we can also do the same thing using AutoMapper. Now, we will see how we can do those conditional mapping using AutoMapper, right? For example, for this example to work, what I'm going to do, I'm going to use this two different classes, product and product DQ, right? So guys, I'm taking different examples so that you can easily understand uh, this concept, right? So instead of taking the same employee and student again and again, right? We are going to create a different types of classes so that you can easily understand those things very clearly. So the next, what I'm going to do, I'm going to create the product detail. So you can see this product class having product ID, name. I'm providing one optional name, quantity, and amount. So 5 properties are there, right? And in the product class, product DTO class, you can see we are having only 4 properties: product ID, item name, item quantity, amount, and that's it. These are the 4 properties which is available in the product DTO class. What is our requirement, right? What is our business requirement? Let us first understand the business requirement, then we will see how we can implement this. We need to map the name property of the product class to the item name property of the product DTO class only if the name value starts with the letter A. Else map the optional name property value of the product class with the item name property of the product DTO class. What it means? In this case, you can see this is my product DTO. Okay, let me do one thing. Control C, comment these things. Let me go to the product DTO. So I will put both the classes in the single place so that it will be easier to understand. See, you can see there is a name property and the optional name property in the product class, in the item name property in the product DTO class. What is my requirement? My requirement is this is my product source object. This is my product DTO destination object. I need to map this product with this product DTO. So while doing the mapping, what is my requirement? My requirement is if this product name value, this property name value starts with the letter A, then map this name property with the item name property. If it is not starts with A, then map this optional name property value with this item name property. This is the first requirement. Second requirement is if the quantity value of the product class is greater than 0, instead of saying class, let me say it object is greater than 0, then only map with the item quantity property of the product DTO. So what he is saying, that there is a property called the quantity available inside this product class. If the quantity is greater than 0, then only map this quantity property with the item quantity property. If the quantity is 0 or if the quantity is something -5, then don't map that quantity value to this quantity. Instead, what is the default value based on the data type that should be in the object, and in this case 0. See, if someone returning the number of a quantity available in -5, is this possible that you see any website where they are saying the number of quantity available is a negative number. Have you ever seen such kind of things in any e-commerce application? No, you will not find that thing. If you by mistake you are getting the quantity value as a negative number, then don't map that value with this item quantity. Or if you are getting zero, then also don't map, because by default it is going to be zero. So instead of showing a negative number which will make a bad impact to your application, so a values as zero. That means product will not be buy by anyone else instead of showing some negative value. So that is what I'm showing here. And third thing is that now if the amount value of the product object, so class instead of class object, is greater than 100, then only map with the amount property. If the product value is greater than 100, then only map to the amount property. That means, so basically what my intention is, how we are going to implement the conditional mapping. Conditional mapping means based on some condition, how we are going to map one property of the source object with the other property of the destination object using AutoMapper. And we are having three different requirements. If the product name start with A, then map this property with this property. Else, if it is not start with F, then map this optional name with the item name. If the quantity is greater than zero, then only map this quantity with item quantity. Else, don't map. If the amount is greater than zero, right? Sorry, greater than 100, then map this amount with this amount property. That means suppose there is a requirement right? Suppose there is a requirement, you need to check whether the amount value is greater than 100 or not. If amount is greater than 100, then only show the product in the website. Otherwise, don't say. So in that scenario, you can provide this condition. If it is greater than zero, then only map the amount value, else don't map. And then if you don't map, the amount is going to be shown zero, and you should have written the logic. If by mistake you are getting the value as a zero or a negative number, then don't show the product in the website, right? For that purpose, you are considering this thing, right? So this is the conditional requirements that what we need to do. Now we'll see how we can do this mapping using AutoMapper conditional mapping, right? And guys, it's very easy, right? Or very simple, right? Let me show you this thing, right? First, let me compare. The first requirement is this name and the optional name. We need to map with the item name based on the condition. So what is the destination property name? Destination property name is item name. That is what I have specified. And map from, it will be map from. It will map from which, map from the source object. But in the source object, what is our condition? We have provided using a ternary operator. So how we are providing that? If source dot name property value starts with A, so this is a method which is available in string class, right? If you go to the definition, then you will see within the system.string class, this is a property available, method available starts with A. If this item name starts with A, then this is going to be my value, else this is going to be the value. So this is nothing but your ternary operator, and in our operator, we have already discussed what is ternary operator. So in this case, if the name starts with A, then whatever the value stored inside this name variable, that will be assigned, or that will be mapped with item name property. Else, if it is not start with A, then optional name value will be mapped with the item name property. Then second, what is our requirement? Map the quantity value if it's greater than zero. See, destination property name is item quantity, and that basically needs to be mapped with the quantity property of product object only if the value is greater than zero. See, action such that initially we are using map from, but now we are using a different method. What is condition? What is the condition? The condition saying that instead of a map from, we are using the condition. The condition is that map from means what? Now it is going to map either this property or that property. One property is mandatory to be mapped. But in this case, it is not mandatory. In this case, it is not mandatory in the sense if the value is greater than 0, then only map. Otherwise, don't map. Don't map when the term don't map comes into the condition, right, into the picture, then you cannot use this map. Then what you need to use? You need to use condition. What is this condition means? This condition will map the property if it is satisfied. If it is not satisfied, then it will not map the property. So what is our condition? The condition is if the property source quantity is greater than 0. If it is greater than 0, then only it will map this property. Otherwise, it will not map. And same in the case of a amount property, right? If the amount is greater than 100, then only it is going to map the value to the amount property, else it will not map. So what is the difference between map and condition? In the case of a map, 100% it is going to map one property value. And in the case of a condition, based on the condition, it is going to map. Based on the condition means, if the condition true, then it is going to map, else it will not map. Right? Clear, guys? What is the difference between the map from and the condition? Guys?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Okay. Next, we just need to test whether it is working fine or not. Right? Let me go to the main method. Right. So what I'm provided, what is the product name? LED TV. Is it start with the letter A? Yes or no?
No.
So in that case, it will map this name property value or optional name property value. Which property value it will map? As
The optional.
optional name, because the condition is not satisfied. It is not start with A. Then quantity is -5. So in this case, quantity is -5. -5 is greater than 0. Condition satisfy or false?
Not satisfied.
If not satisfy, what is the default value of an integer that will be stored inside this item quantity? So in item quantity, you will see 0 instead of -5, right? And amount is 1000. 1000 is greater than 100.
Yes.
So if 1000 is greater than 100, then in that case, it will map that amount value with the amount property, right? So once you have done this, right? Let me show you, this is before mapping the object, right? So what I can say, so before mapping object and after mapping the object, this is product data and this is product data. Let me run the application and show you the differences. See, product object 101 LATV, this. After mapping product ID, the same item name, product name not start with uh, a product name not start with it. That is what we have provided in the optional name, right? And then item quantity here -5, here it is showing the amount 1000, and here it is showing the amount 1000. Clear, guys? How you can use a conditional mapping? For conditional mapping, we are having two options. You can use map from, if you have either of the properties to be mapped, and based on the condition, if you want to map or not map, then you need to use the condition method. Any question from anyone? Clear, guys?
Yes.
Okay. Next, what we are going to discuss is AutoMapper ignore method. So what exactly AutoMapper ignore method? It's a very interesting thing, right? See, by default, AutoMapper tries to map all the properties from the source type to destination type when both source and the destination type property names are same, right? For example, if you look at this employee and employee DTO, let me show you these things practically. Employee and employee DTO. This is my employee class having 4 properties: ID, name, address, and email. And this is my employee DTO. Right? This is my employee DTO. Right? Now what I can do is I can go with employee DTO. Right? Employee and employee DTO. Then so this is my employee object, and this is my using AutoMapper. I'm mapping that employee object with the employee DTO. So this is employee object data, and this is employee DTO object data. So now if you run the application, then you will see both employee object and employee DTO holding the same value. So why is this? Because by default, AutoMapper will map the properties if they are same name. And in this case, ID name, address, email, the property name is same as ID name, email, and address. So properties names are same means they are going to be mapped automatically by the AutoMapper. Now, what is our requirement? Our requirement is we don't want to map this address property. I don't want to map this address property with this address property. Sometimes some requirement is there. See, if you are not putting this property here, then that is fine, right? If you are not putting this property here, that is fine. But if you are putting this property and here and also here, then what, see, sometimes what is your requirement, you are getting the data from the database or from some API, and from those data, while you are sending those data to the client, you want to skip some of the properties value, right? You don't want to set some of the properties value. Then in that case, what you need to do, you just need to ignore some of the properties value. And if you want to ignore, then how you can do this using AutoMapper? See, if you are going with manual mapping, then you can set this property value as null, right? Or if you do not assign anything, by default, this address property is going to be null. But with the AutoMapper, this is not the case. By default, this address value will be assigned with this address property value. But what our requirement, we need to make sure that addresses should not be mapped. And if that is the requirement, then what you need to do, you need to use the AutoMapper ignore method, right? AutoMapper ignored method, right? So what you just need to do on the destination property, what you need to call on the destination address property, just call the ignore method, right? How you are going to call the ignore method? Like this: destination address action ACT means action delegate dot ignore method. That means what? Now in property mapping, this address property will be ignored by entity framework. So now entity framework will not assign the address property value of the source object to this destination address object. Now with this ignore method, now run the application and see whether it is working as expected or not. See, here you can see ID name, address is Mumbai, but in this case, address is showing as not. Why? Because we just call the ignore method of the address property, which will make sure that this property is not going to be mapped with the address object. Here, guys.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Right. But now we are having one issue. What is the issue? So now see, if my employee class having 20 properties, and in employee DTO class having 20 properties, then do I need to call this ignore method 20 and out of 20 properties, I don't want to use that I don't want to map 5 properties values. Then do I need to call this for member method 5 times? Yes, you have to call this for member 5 times. And again, like this, if I'm having 100 classes, right? 100 the classes and 100 DTO classes in our application, and and there are more than 40 or 50 classes where we do not need some of the properties. Then if you are calling this ignore method again and again, then think how big your code within your initialized AutoMapper class. Is there any better solution? Yes, there is some better solution. How we can do this, right? How you can do this means, see, if you are ignoring one property, two properties, right? Then that is fine. You can use this for member method and ignore method, right? But if your class having more number of properties and more number of properties you want to ignore, and if you are having more number of classes in which you want to ignore these things, then you cannot go with this manual activities, right? You need to find some better way to do the same thing, right? If you want to ignore multiple properties in a better way, then we need to find a better solution, because this solution is not going to work anymore. Again and again, who is coming to this mapper class and who is going to change the things? This is going to be a very hectic process. We need to overcome this problem. And how we are going to overcome this? Let us see the step-by-step process, right? The first step is to create a class which is inherited from the attribute class, and I'm providing this class name as nomap attribute. So let me go and create a class, and this class is inherited from the nomap attribute class. So no, what is attribute? The attribute means whenever you decorate any property, right? Right. So basically what is the attribute? And you can see if you go to the definition, then it is saying represent the base class for custom attributes, right? If you want to create a custom attribute class, then you need to inherit from this attribute class. Those who are working with a MVC, web API, they know that each action method, each controller is decorated with some route attribute. If you are working with some security kind of concept, right, you can add decorative with filter attribute. Similarly, it is an attribute which we can decorate with some property. How you are going to decorate, that we will see, right? So first of all, what you need to do, you need to create a attribute class which is inherited from the attribute class, right? And you can give any name, right? So this is step one. So what is the step two? The step two is whatever the property you don't want to be mapped, right? You just need to decorate those property with the no map attribute. In employee class, I don't want this address property to be mapped. I don't want this email property to be mapped. So what you just need to do, you can decorate this address with no map attribute and the email with no map attribute. So while you are going, you can write no map, that is also fine. If you write the full name, that is also fine. So here I'm going with the no map, and here I can write no map attribute. Both are going to be same thing.
Is there any possibilities that we can do with the data annotation namespace?
Sorry?
In the data annotation namespace, we have this no map things, right? This attribute.
So you just tell me why we need data annotation.
For no mapping.
No, why we need data annotation? You just tell me first. What is the requirement of a data annotation?
Actually, why I'm asking, in the data annotation class, we have such attributes, right? So no map.
I know data annotation attribute class having such attributes, but my question is, what is the use of a data annotation attribute? Why we use data annotation in our MVC and WebAPI applications?
To apply the additional information of an property.
No. Data annotation is basically used for validating the data, whether the data what you are going to store in the property is a valid data or not. For that purpose, we are making data annotation. You can use the required attribute, which will make sure that this property is going to be required property. And on the UI, if you are not passing any value, then it will give you a compile time. It will give you a error. There is something called a max length, min length, right? Then the use of those attributes is to provide some kind of a validation to the properties or to the entity what you are using, right? And that is the use of this no map is a different purpose. You understood?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Right. So that doesn't mean, see, is in data annotation we are using like attribute, but purpose is different. If you are thinking that I use a filter attribute, right, that filter in the sense of authorize, right? In the data annotation, authorize purpose is different, data annotation purpose is different, this no map attribute purpose is different, right? Their attribute, but they are categorized into different categories. For security purpose you are having different set of attributes. For data annotation, you are having some different set of attributes. And for providing the routing concept, if you remember routing, then the route attribute is there. That the purpose of and the route attribute is also used like this only, right? Means the purpose of each attribute is different, and each attribute belongs to a different category. And in this case, no map attribute, basically it is going to be used with the AutoMapper when you don't want this property to be mapped. And I don't want this address property to be mapped. So I decorate this with the no map. And here, email, I also decorated this with the no map. And here you can see attribute, it is in faded color. So using this attribute is optional. If you use, no issue. If you don't use, then like this, then also no issue. So the first step is you need to create one custom class which is inherited from the attribute class. And then whatever the custom class you created, that you need to use with your source type and decorate the properties which you don't want to be mapped by the AutoMapper, right? This is the second step, right? Then what is the third step? Third step, we need to create an extension method. Let me first create the extension method, and then I will explain you what is the use of that extension method. But before that, guys, tell me, to create an extension method, what is the criteria? Extension method means that method should be a static or non-static.
Static.
Static. That method belongs to a class. That class is going to be static or non-static. Guys, you forget static method. Extension method you forgot, I think. So extension method consider three rules. First, it should be created within a static class. It should be created as a static method, right? The first parameter should be the class from which it belongs to, right? Class name as the first parameter. And you need to specify this parameter using which keyword?
This keyword.
So this is the requirement of a static method, right? Let us proceed and see whether this using this requirement we can create an extension method. So extension method means the class should be static, method should be static. First parameter is the class name using which we can access the method, right? And here I'm providing the class name as ignore no map extension static class. This is the ignore map method, right? So ignore map method, I am providing the method name as ignore map, and the and it is going to be a generic method. So generic method means you can see it is taking two parameters, right? Two parameters. What is the type? Type is t source and t destination. The first parameter you can see here, I'm specifying I mapping expression. And this I mapping expression is nothing but you can say this is the mapper configuration, right? If you go to the mapper configuration, then you will see I map configuration. Where is that I map configuration? IMapping, sorry, IMapping expression. Sorry, I'm saying IMapping configuration. It is IMapping expression, right? And this IMapping expression, if you go to the configuration, right, and this is returning something called IMapping, where is that? IMapping expression. IMapping configuration, IMapper configuration expression, right? So basically, your class type should accept the first parameter as IMapping expression, and here you need to specify the T source and the T destination. What is T source and T destination? I will explain in some time. And the return type is IMapping expression, right? So the signature, I will come to the later part. But the thing that you need to understand, this method this method working, this method is a generic type, and while using this method, you need to specify the source and the destination. What is the source type and what is the destination type? That is what you need to specify. Then let us start understanding the code. First of all, you need to identify what is the data type of the T source. As it's a generic method, so any type you specify using the type of method, you can specify the source type. So using this method, you can get the type information, right? And once you get the type information, right, this type means it's a class, and as it's a class, it might be have multiple properties. And if you want to get all the properties, as of now, we have not discussed the concept called a reflection, right? Get properties, get methods, get attributes, right? Get constructors like this. So many, what I can say, so many properties are there. Get properties, right? Get methods, right? Similarly, get constructor should be there. So methods are there, right? So and get a member. So this member info. So like this, what are the properties available within that particular type? Okay, for now, what I can do is copy this, paste it here, comment this. Instead of T source, what I'm going to do, I'm creating employee DTO, employee DTO, and employee DTO, right? So here, instead of T source, what I'm writing, employee, right? So now you can understand. I'm creating this ignore map method, which will work with two types. One is employee, which will act as the source type, and employee DTO, which is going to work as the destination type. And from that, first of all, I need to get the source type information. What is the type of this employee, right? So you will see it is returning the type of, means this is a method, right? Which is going to return the type information. Type information means what? Within this type, what are the properties available? What are the methods available? What are the members available? What are the constructors available? All these things, if you want to pass, you need to use this type of method. Once you call this method, it is returning me some type, right? The data type is going to be type here. You can say system.type, right? And from this type, we are interested with the properties. What are the properties available inside this employee class? If you want to fetch dynamically, then you need to use the get properties method. Similarly, if you want to fetch the methods, similarly, if you want to fetch the members, members means the variables, and if you want to fetch the constructor, so for all those things, different methods is there. And once you start discussing the reflection concept, at the time I will explain you these things. So basically here I'm using a for each loop, means what? Now all the properties what are available within the employee class, those properties I can access here. So here you can see the variable type is property info, right? Property info means that property, suppose within this employee class, first it will fetch the ID property. That ID property info it is going to give me. Whether this property is a getter type property, whether it is a setter type property, whether it is a public property, whether it is a private protected property, what is the type of the property, whether it is decorated with any kind of attribute like no map attribute or not, right? All the information you can access by using this property info. So instead of this, you can also write property is the type? System dot reflection dot property info, right? Using system dot reflection, and here I can write property info, right? So that property information you will fetch by using this variable. Now, what is our requirement? We need to fetch the property name. To fetch the property name, we need to use this syntax. Get properties from the source type. What is the source type? This is the source type. Get properties name. So from this source type, please fetch me the property name. What is this property is holding? This property is holding many information. Name, what is the name, what is the data type, what is the whether this property is decorated with any kind of attribute or not. Every information it is going to return. So this will return me the property. So please give the property information, right? Once you got the property name, then what you need to do is you need to check whether that property is decorated with no map attribute or not, right? So for that we are using this descriptor dot attributes, whether this no map attribute is decorated with that property or not. If it is decorated with no map attribute, right, then in that case it will return the value, right? And if this attribute object is not null, means that property what I'm accessing, right, is decorated with no map attribute, and in that case please execute the code whichever written inside this. And inside this, what I'm doing, I'm just calling this ignore method, right? So with these changes, what will happen now? Right now, what will happen now? While calling this method, you need to provide two information: what is the source object and what is the destination object. And from this source object, it will fetch all the properties one by one, and it will check whether the property is decorated with no map attribute or not. If it is decorated with no map attribute, then it will simply call the ignore method to that property name, right? So if I'm creating this employee DTO and employee, then what will happen? That this method I can only use with employee and employee DTO. But if you go with this syntax, then it will become a generic type, right? And as it becomes a generic type, then what will happen? You can use this method with any type, and to make any type. Type means today you are working, you want to ignore some property while mapping between employee and employee DTO. Tomorrow you want to ignore some property while doing the mapping between product and the product DTO. You can still use this method because it's a generic method. But if you go with this syntax, then it is not a generic method. Rather, what I can say, it is a non-generic method which can only work with the employee and employee DTO. For that purpose, we are going with this generic method, right? So the third step is to create one extension method, and that extension method role and responsibility is to take two object as a parameter, t source and a t destination, and then it will check all the properties of the t source object, and it will check whether the source object property is decorated with no map attribute or not. And if it is decorated with no map attribute, then call the ignore method, right? This is the third step. Once
So
you, sorry,
so if I go to change the source, you could just the source, the type of the source, return it to T source.
yes, sorry. So here T source and a T destination. T source and a T destination is nothing but
I
this
think we forgot to change the type
type.
or the source here. Source type type of it's T source, not employee. On the variable there where you were declaring the source type.
This one.
Yes,
Oh, so,
the
sorry,
type.
you have to, this is a mistake. Here we need to use T source. Okay. So here we need to use T source because this is the source type object. So T source. Now it's clear.
Yes, sir.
So here you need to use T source because we have removed that employee. We do not need to hard code any type information here. Everything is generic so that we can use this method with any kind of mapping, right? So this is the third step where you need to create an ignore no map extension method. If this code is if not clear to you, so don't worry, you just need to write this code. This is a generic code. You can simply copy paste the code and no need to do a single change to this code, and it will work with any kind of a mapping, right? This is the third step. And in the fourth step, what we need to do, we need to change the mapper configuration. Now what we need to do, you can see this is the create map method, and to this map method I just need to call the ignore map method. So this ignore map extension method is not nothing but this one. You just need to call this ignore map method, and once you call this ignore map method, the code written within this method is going to be executed, and it is going to be executed, and it is going to check, right? For whichever type, I just need to call the ignore map method, right? Ignore method, and those properties will be skipped for database, will be skipped for mapping, right? Now, if you look at the class, here we have decorated the address property and the email property with the no map attribute, right? Now, if you go to the main method, then you will see that this is I have set address name email for all the properties, and here you will see that the employee object will having 4 properties, and in the employee DTO you will see that address and email will not be printed on the console because these 2 properties are simply ignored. And the way we have written the code, it is a generic method, and using that generic method, you can see we are ignoring the address and the email property value. So if you are not understanding this method code, don't worry, just copy paste this code. It will work as expected, right? And then you just need to create, this is the first step, this is the second step, and in the third step, this is the first step, you need to create, this is step 1, right? This is step 1. You need to create the no map attribute, and in step 2, this is the step 2, decorate the properties which you do not want in mapping, right? I have decorated address and the email. This is third step, create an extension method, right? And if you don't understand this code, right, then just copy paste the code, right? And in the fourth step, what you need to do, just call the method, ignore map extension method. That's it. And now in employee and employee DTO, you want this thing. Tomorrow you are having tomorrow classes where you want to ignore some of the things. And you just need to call this ignore map method, and it will work as expected because we have made that method as generic. With these changes, if you run the application, then you will get the data as expected. Any question from anyone? Right?
No questions, sir.
Okay. So you might have some questions related to this because we have not discussed the reflection concept. So you might be having some problems. What is this type descriptor? What is this get properties, right? What is this attribute? But once we start discussing the reflection, which is also in our course syllabus, then you will get very good idea regarding this, right? So to give you a simple thought process, right? So when I'm calling, right? So what is the reflection if you want to know? Once I type the EMP dot, it is showing me some information, email address. So this is only because of the reflection. Automatically, Visual Studio makes use of the reflection concept to show us the required properties, methods, what are available as part of that type, right? But once we start discussing the reflection concept, right, you will understand these things very clearly. But for now, this is a generic method, and if you want to use, you can now simply copy paste this code to your create a class and simply copy paste. It is going to work as expected. The last thing what we are going to discuss today is how we are going to store fixed and dynamic values in destination property, right? Fixed and dynamic value in the sense, suppose you are having suppose you are having this permanent address and temporary address two classes, and you want to map those things, right? In permanent address, you are having this created by column, and in temporary address also you are having this created and by and created on column. But in this case, whatever value stored, you don't want those values here, right? You don't want those values here. Instead, what is your requirement in this created by property? You want to store some hard coded or fixed value system. And in this created on property, you want to store some dynamic value, right? Dynamic value, let's assume the current date and time you want to store inside this created on property. Then in that case, what you need to do, right? So how you can do this? So this is nothing but the concept how you can store the fixed value and the dynamic value come into the picture, right? So if you are working with a if you are working with AutoMapper less than 8 version, right? Before AutoMapper 8.0, right? If you are working with a AutoMapper 8.0 or less version, then in that case, you can use this huge value and result using method to achieve the same. But we are not using AutoMapper 8.0. We are using the AutoMapper version, which is a 10 point AutoMapper version 10, right? If you go to the properties, then you will see version is 10. That means you cannot use those huge value and result using method to provide fixed value and dynamic values. This method are depreciated. Then how we can achieve the same? We can achieve the same using the map from method. Let us see how we can implement this. Let me create the permanent address class, right? This is my permanent address having 4 properties. Let me create the temporary address with the 4 properties, right? So while doing the mapping, we want to map the temporary address. We want to map this permanent address with this temporary address, but we don't want to map these 2 properties value, right? Whatever property value stored by created by, I don't want that property with this created by, and I also don't want to map this created on property value to this created on. Instead, I want to store a fixed value. Fixed value in this case, I want to store system, and in this case, I want to store the current date time. Date time dot now I want to store here. How you can see? How you can do this? That means it is a fixed value, and here it is going to be a dynamic value. How you are going to store these 2 things? This is what we need to discuss. Right? So for that purpose, what you need to do, okay, let me first copy the code, then I will explain you the code. Right? See, before AutoMapper 8.0, we generally used this use value method, but now if you use this use value method, it is going to give you an exception, right? It is going to give you a not exception, it is a compile time error. So you cannot use this use value, but if you are using AutoMapper 8.0 or less version, lesser than 8.0, then you can use it. So this is not going to be work. Then how you are going to do this? We are going to use this map method. So for member created by, I'm going to map the name from the source. But here I'm not specifying any source property. I'm simply specifying the hard-coded system. So this is how you can provide the system, or you can say how you can provide the fixed value. This is going to be what. And if you are working with the AutoMapper 8.0, you can you can use this result using method to provide some dynamic value. For example, return date time dot now. You can use this thing, but this is not going to work now. For that purpose, you can go with a different approach, right? For example, let me show you the difference. So, for example, If I'm going with this method, then what will happen? Right? So here I'm using datetime.now, and here I'm using system dot src dot system. This will give you a runtime error. See, let me run. See what is the static property require null instance, non-static property require non-null instance, right? So in this case, what exactly it means? It's a you need to provide a static property here. So if you go to this is a struct, right? So you need to provide a static property here. So you cannot use datetime.now here. So what you need to do? You basically need to create one method, and that method type should be static, and that method should be going to return you the dynamic value. So in this case, currently I'm retrieving the datetime.now. Any logic, suppose you want to provide some string static dynamic value. So you have to write the property type is going to be string, and whatever the logic you want, you can implement and return that value, and that value will be stored here. So instead of this, what I can do is you need to use get the current datetime method, and that method is going to return us the dynamic value. So any fixed value, you can hard code the fixed value. Any dynamic value, you can create one method and just assign that method here, and whatever the method return, that will be assigned to this created on property value, and here the hard coded value will be assigned to this one, right? So let me run the application and show you the data. Missing type configuration on supported mapping. What is oh, why I'm getting this error? Because I'm mapping employee with employee DTO, but those employee and employee DTO information is not provided here. So basically what we need to do, we need to modify the class, right? So we need to modify the program class main method to use our permanent and temporary address. Say in this case, you can see for permanent address, I'm providing name and address. I'm not providing this created by and created on property values. But after mapping, you will see that in the temporary address, the created by value will be system, and created on is nothing but the current system date type, right? Let me run the application and show you the output. So here you can see, right? You can see here created by empty, created on empty, but in the TTO, in the temporary object, right? Oh, this is no permanent address. This is not actual the permanent address. This is going to be the temporary address. This is going to be the temporary address, right? And here you can see created by value is system, and the created on value is nothing but the current system date type. So this is how you can provide some fixed value and some dynamic value to the properties of a destination object. Clear, guys? Right? If you are surfing the internet, then you will find this each value and the result using method, but these are not going to be work with the latest AutoMapper, right? But if you are using older version, then if you are working with some project where they are using AutoMapper 8 or AutoMapper 7, 6, then if you are seeing this use value method, that is fine, because whatever this use value method doing here, that is the same thing done by the map from method now. Here, guys, or any question? Clear?
Yes.
Okay. The last one, what we are going to discuss in today's session is null substitution in AutoMapper. What do we mean by this? The meaning of this is, see, in this example, right? Suppose this is your permanent address, and this object contains some name address created by and created on column. It might be possible that while storing the permanent address, you have not stored the data for the address property. Then in that case, what will be the default value that is stored in the database? That is nothing but you can say null. But while creating the temporary address, right? So what is required? See, if this property contains some null value, right? Then while you are mapping with this address property, then that null value is also going to be stored here. For example, let me store here null, right? I'm storing null here. With these changes right now, if I run the application, then you will see that null value in both the address. So here address is empty, here address is empty. Here address is not showing anything means what? It is showing null. Null, it's not a value, so you cannot see that value null here, right? But what is our requirement? Now, if the source property contains some null value, we want to provide a different value for that property. And for that purpose, what we need to use? We need to use null substitute method. And for that property, what we need to do? We need to use null substitute method. See how. For example, if the address is null in the source property, we want to store what I can say, we want to store the value NA. If we null, then we want to store NA in the address property in the destination property. And for that purpose, what you need to call? You need to call this power member method. And in the destination property, what you need to do? You need to call this null substitute method. And here NA is available. Right? What it means? It means now if the source property contains the address value null, then it will store NAA. If it is contains some value, that value will be stored, right? So currently the address property contains null. Now if you run the application, then destination object will be storing the value NA, right? Because this is null and that is substituted by NA, what we have provided using the null substitute method. But if the destination property contains some value, then that value is going to be stored and that value is going to be mapped. Right? You can see here Mumbai and here also Mumbai. Clear, guys?
Yes.
That's it for today. Actually, my health is very down.
Sorry, sir.
Yeah. So actually, my health is very down. I'm not taking the classes from the last 2-3 days, right? But I thought the course is going to be delayed. We should take some long session classes on the weekend. So that's why I take the classes today. And tomorrow we are going to continue our discussion related to LinQ. And in the next weekend, we are going to discuss .NET framework architecture. How exactly the .NET framework created, right? As a developer, right? As a senior developer, you should know the internal architecture. What is exactly CLR? What is CTS? What is common type system? What is a language? What is the CLR? How exactly the garbage collector work? Right? How the compilation takes place? How the interpretation takes place? Right? What are the different component? What is the role of an exception manager? How internally exception manager will handle those things? What is common type system? Right? We are creating one application, right? And right. If you see .NET supported different types of programming language, C Sharp, VB, JSR, WebSR, how all are working under one roof. All these things we will discuss. We'll discuss what is DLL, how we can create what is a weakly typed DLL, what is a strongly typed DLL, how we can put one DLL in GSE. GSE means global assembly case, right? So those things we are going to be discussed in the upcoming weekend, and that is also very important as a .NET developer, right? If you know these things, that is well and fine. If you don't know, then also fine. But I would suggest ki as you are becoming one .NET architect, you want to become a professional .NET developer, then you should know the basic concept. Basic, it is not the basic concept, it is the architectural concept which you don't find generally the normal developer aware about such concept. But as you are want to become a good software developer, and if you want to master in .NET, then you should know those things. And that is those things we are going to be discussed in the next weekend. And in this weekend, I'm trying to complete LinQ. And from next in this week, I'm trying to complete LinQ. From the next week, we are going to start a design patterns. And again, design pattern is free for everyone. If you and any of your friends wants to learn design pattern in depth, right, then you can share the link. I will share the link. You can share the link with them. They can attend the session, right? And design pattern is very, very important. And even I have created lots of articles related to design patterns, right? If you go and check design patterns in the internet, then somewhere you will find my website, right? I have written more than 30-40 articles on design patterns. You will learn what is a creational design pattern, what is structural design pattern, right? What are behavioral design pattern? We'll discuss in each category. In these three categories, there are 23 design patterns. We'll discuss all those 23 design patterns. Apart from that, we will discuss what exactly dependency injection design pattern, what are a repository design pattern, what are inversion of control IOC, all these things we are going to discuss, right? And for that, for to learn those things, what is the minimum requirement is you should have a good understanding of the OOPS concept. If you know the OOPS concept, then you can easily understand the design patterns. That's it for today. Anybody having any question?
No questions, sir.
No, sir.
Okay. Okay, fine. And once we complete the C sharp, then we will start .NET Core, right? Because .NET Core, many people are messaging me, testing me. So when you are going to start a .NET Core, and actually I'm planning to start the .NET Core in the starting of March because my health issues and because office work, right? Lots of work on my office, right? I could not get more time to do the things, right? But definitely I will try to complete this course as soon as possible, and in the same time I'm going to start a .NET Core, right? And again, .NET Core you will like other institutions, right? I don't know how they are teaching, but if you learn from me, then again in depth means the way I'm taking the classes, explaining the concept, providing the documentations. In the same way, I'm also going to complete the .NET Core. Yeah, thank you guys.
So, sorry, what about reflection, sir?
Exactly, reflections, those are a part of our syllabus, right? If you, okay, let me open the course syllabus. Right, so whatever mentioned in the course syllabus, everything I'm going to cover, right? REFLECTION, right? So you will understand reflection. I have not taken that class. You will understand reflection, file handling, everything I'm going to cover. Don't worry, that are part of the course syllabus, right?
All right, thank you.
Yeah. So I have shared the course syllabus from the day one. I'm not going to skip or miss a single chapter. Even I'm covering more and more concept, right? What we mentioned in the syllabus, I'm definitely going to cover because I know these concepts are important. As these are important, definitely I'm going to discuss this concept. There is something called expand object. What is the difference between a dynamic and reflection, right? Dynamic versus var, what is volatile keyword, right? You will understand file handling, even how to work with, I have mentioned how to work with Excel file. So this is one of the important concept, right? That is also I'm going to cover as part of this course, right? Excel file means how you will get the data from the Excel file, how you will create a Excel file from the data. Those things we are also going to discuss as part of this course syllabus, right? currently what we are discussing, currently today we have completed this chapter, right? ADO.NET we have, so what I'm trying to cover the important concept as soon as possible. ADO.NET, one of the important concept we have covered, right? Then what we have covered, uh, LinQ, we are already in the process, already 50-60% we have covered, right? Solid design principle we have covered, right? And then we will start the design patterns because these are the important concept, right? So accordingly, I will plan and definitely I'm going to cover each and every concept. Don't worry and don't think that I'm going to skip or miss anything. Everything I'm going to cover, right? So initial what I'm planning, what is important, what is mandatory, what is necessary, those things I'm taking first, covering first, because if you attend my classes, then you will see that the way multi-threading, parallel programming, exception handling, collection, asynchronous programming, right? The solid principle, ADO.NET entity framework, LinQ, the way we are, I'm taking the classes, I'm explaining these things you will not find in any other institution. They will complete. See, already we have taken 7 to 8 classes for LinQ. They will completed LinQ in one class. Do you think that in one class you will able to understand all the LinQ concept? Do you think that in 2 classes you will understand the entity framework, or in 1 or 2 classes you will understand the ADO.NET concept? It's not possible. It's totally impossible. Yes, what is possible? Only the basic example. What is in today's session? What is the example I have shown? Right in today, where is AutoMapper? In today's session, what is the in part one I have shown? They only show you these things, but later on, how you are going to map from a complex type to primitive type to complex type, right? How exactly the reverse mapping is worked. If you are working with reverse mapping, if you want type content complex, another type contains some primitive type, if you want to ignore some properties, if you want to provide some fixed value, some dynamic value, if you want to substitute some null value, right? How you can create a generic method for ignoring the properties, those things they are not going to cover. What they will show you, they will show you AutoMapper, that is basically used to map the to one object data with another object automatically, and one simple example, that's it. But do you think that that is more than enough, more than sufficient? No, that is not enough. That is not sufficient. If you are going to work in real-time project, means you should know these things in detail so that you can easily implement. And if you are working with any existing project, then you can also easily understand the existing code. If you know the concept, if you don't know, then how you will understand the concept, right? Right, and these things only those people who are having working experience, they can only tell these things. If someone just a trainer, someone if just looking at some YouTube videos and explaining the concept, taking the classes, then he will not understand, he will not explain these things to you, because he doesn't know. If he doesn't know, then how he can explain these things to you guys, right? And to make you the difference, so what I can suggest you, please go through the design patterns course of mine, right? I have provided this course free of cost to everyone on my website. Please check this site and please compare the content with other side, and then you will just see the difference. What is and in this side, everything is provided by me only. So whatever content you will see, CMBC, design pattern, .NET Core, everything, every content related to .NET are written by me only. Just compare my content with the other content, and then you will see the difference. What is the difference between a normal trainer, normal writer with a person who was having more than 10 years of experience? Definitely you will see the difference if you are taking training, or if you are getting some knowledge from an experienced person, right? Any question from anyone?
Sir,
Yeah.
sir, we are in position to start new batch by 15th of March.
No, I don't think so. Actually, I'm planning to start the new batch, but as my health is not down from the last, see, if you see in the last week, in the last week, I have taken some break. In this week also, I have taken some break because of my health problem, right? So I don't think I can take 2 classes parallel. right? I don't have that
Okay.
much of patience and the health is good to take two classes parallelly. So basically, once this batch is almost 80% completed, then I will start the new batch related to .NET Core, and the rest 20%. Rest 20% means the C Sharp 7, 8, 9 new features and all these things. I can take those classes in the weekend, and in the weekdays I can start the .NET Core batch. That is what I'm planning.
Okay, sir. Actually, sir, I have to start some work in MBC or MBC core. So, I want you please guide me. MBC is the right pattern, or I have to go for a core?
I would suggest to go for core.
Core. So I have to still at least 3 to 4 months after starting new batch. So I will go for core. Okay, sir.
Yeah. So
Okay, thank
definitely,
you.
basically, nowadays, if you, what is my planning? Let me show you. So most of the
Yeah,
time,
sir.
sorry.
No, please go.
Yeah, so most of the time, in .NET Core, people are developing API using .NET Core. API using .NET Core, right? And the client application that can be anything, right? They are using React, they are using Angular, right? So React, they are using Angular, right? Android, they're using iOS, right? For .NET people, what is mandatory API? So how you will show API? So what I'm planning first, I will start ASP.NET Core basic concept, ASP.NET Core basic. Basic means it is mandatory. Mandatory. It is basic for mandatory for both and web API, right? Once I discuss the basic concept, then I will discuss EF core, Entity Framework core, and then I will discuss ASP.NET Core Web API, because most demanded things nowadays for .NET is .NET Core. And then I will discuss I will discuss ASP.NET Core MVC, right? And some advanced concept is there, that is ASP.NET Core Blazor is also come into the market. That is also I will give some idea, but mostly I will keep focus on these four parts. I will give you some idea related to ASP.NET Core Blazor. If you guys are only interested, if you guys are not interested with the Blazor, then I am not going to touch, but I'm going to cover these four things. Because most of the people are interested with the Web API rather than MVC. So I'm going to start Web API first, and then I'm going to cover MVC. Right?
Sir, my intention only to work with in web format only. That's why I am asking you again and again.
Right, that is what I'm saying now. That is
Yeah.
your application, because you are developing an application where you are including everything, right? Right.
Yes, sir.
But most of the industry, right? If you ask 10 people, right, those who are working in 10 different companies, they will say that they are working on web API only, not the MVC part. Why? Because see, in today's world, so you just tell me how many percentage of people are using web. Okay, you just tell me how much time you are using Facebook web, and how much time you are using Facebook. I can say Facebook app. How much time? How much time you are using Amazon website, and how much time you are using Amazon app?
Sir, it's mobile use is 80% and 20% web.
Yeah, so 20% web. So basically, this is not exactly 20%. You can say 10%. I don't think nowadays people are buying something using Amazon website. They are having the Amazon app installed on their mobile and using that app they are buying the product, right? So most of
Yes,
the
sir.
time, right?
Sir,
Nowadays,
you are
I'm coming.
absolute.
I'm coming to your point, right? So that means what?
Okay,
Now,
sir.
most of the time, nowadays people are moving from web towards the app world. They are just trying to move from website. They are trying to use the application as more as possible, right? So any business, but don't think that web is not exist. Web is still exist, app, but more demand is on app. So whenever a client develop one application, nowadays, suppose one client start his business and he wants to develop one application, he will develop the website, no doubt about it. But you will give more priority to app. Will give more priority to app. And the app again, it might be again it is developing Android app. Again, it is developing iOS app. Right? Both apps they are developed. Right? So basically, whenever a client wants to develop one project, one application, he need a website, but he will give more priority to the app. Then as a company, right? As a company, suppose you are having one company, then what you will do? You will provide both website and application. Then what is your requirement? How you are going to design these things?
Okay,
Definitely,
sir. Yes, sir.
definitely
Yes.
for website, what you will do, you can say, yeah, website. Okay, let me hire some React or Angular people. React or Angular, they can develop the application, right? They can develop the application, and for Android iOS, they can develop this. And for that, what you need to do? You need to develop some API, right? And this API is going to be consumed by the React or Angular, who is whatever the language or technology you use to develop the website. And the same API is going to be developed by the Android and iOS application. And this API for developing nowadays, most of the people are using .NET Core Web API, right? And coming to your point, right? Coming to your point, if you are simply developing one application, if you are only developing one website, then there is no app, nothing is there. Then you can go with ASP.NET Core MVC, using which you can develop a simple website where everything will be integrated together. But the problem is tomorrow the same client wants to develop the mobile app. Then what you will do? Then what you will do? Again, already in the ASP.NET Core MVC, you have already written the business logic. You have already write the data access logic. Everything is written there, right? Only for the presentation purpose, you again need to write, again you need to develop what? API, and again you need to write the business logic and data access logic. That means why you are going to duplicate the same thing again and again? Because of your architecture. As you are not developing these things, right, properly, if you are not architect, and the reason for this is you are going with this. So what I would suggest is, if you are developing application using ASP.NET Core MVC, that is fine, but you should architect the architecture in such a way that this MVC application for the business logic and data access logic, he should interact with your API, right? And in this MVC part, you just only need the presentation layer where all the business logic, data access logic, whatever logic, everything is implemented in the API. From your MVC application, you just need to call the API. API will do all these things. Today, your MVC application, there is no difficulty. It's possible that MVC from your MVC application, you can call the API. Tomorrow, the client needs some Android application. Okay, no issue. I'm having my API from my Android application. I will call the API. Next day, iOS is coming to the picture. Okay, no issue. From my iOS client, we'll call the same API. So you have to architect in this way, right, Pratik?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Absolutely,
Right.
sir.
So
Okay,
now,
sir. No. Yeah,
so
sir.
so you need to decide. See, in MVC application, you can write the presentation logic, business logic, data access logic, everything.
Sir,
But what I would
yeah,
suggest,
I understand. 80, we can say 60% is the common part. So why we left the uh, basic and the main thing. So we will go for according to yours.
Right. So in this case, there is the future changes you can easily accept. Now, tomorrow, there
Yes,
is no
yes.
guarantee that the client will not ask you for the Android app or iOS app. If the client will ask, then what you will do?
Okay,
If
okay,
you,
no problem.
and in this case also, na, your MVC part is there to develop the way. I'm not asking to hire some React or Angular developer to develop the way we pay. You can use the MVC in that case, and that MVC will
Yes.
interact with your API. So this is the architecture that you need to understand. But for if you
Okay.
want to consume API from your MVC application, then first you need to understand what is API, how API work, and this is the reason why I have architecture course level like this. First the basic concept, then entity framework core, then web API, then core MVC. And if you guys are interested, then I will start or give some idea related to ASP.NET Core.
Yes, sir. Yes. Okay, sir.
Yeah. Any question from anyone else?
No, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Thank you.